All right, I do believe we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I'm your humble host, Lev Polyakov at LevPo on Twitter. Please follow me on Twitter as always. We have Weird Hiker versus Ryan O'Shea today in yet another reverse debate, argue my position swap debate, whatever you want to call it. And this one is going to be on transhumanism. And of course, we have with us the great Gennady Stolyarov II, chair of the United States Transhumanist Party. Welcome back, my friend. Thank you so much for coming back in here. We are going to have later on, Calth Respector is going to be coming in. We are going to have Astral Flight coming in. And I think Geo is going to be coming in a little bit later as well. So welcome, everybody. Please don't forget to subscribe. As always, I love each and every one of you. And I don't say that just as a shill. I mean, no, okay, I don't know who you people are, but I love you enough to say that I respect you. I respect your views. Let's get on with the show. Ryan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, I am Ryan O'Shea. I am a transhumanist, and I have my background is in media, so I do a lot of the public-facing, forward-facing kind of discussions about the future of ethics in science and technology that I think we need to be talking about. I am the host of the Future Grind podcast, which dives into a lot of those topics with long-form conversations with technologists and thinkers in this space. And I also produce, host, and edit videos for Lifespan Extension Advocacy Foundation, or lifespan.io. Check out our weekly Lifespan news episodes to stay up to date with that.
Excellent, Ryan. Thank you so much for being here. And Weird Hiker, you've been on Break the Rules several times before, but please tell us a little bit about yourself and also that beautiful photo, which you told me what it was, but for those who are very amazed at whether this is Photoshop or not, let them know what exactly it is and a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Lev. I'm Weird Hiker. I don't really have any labels. My credentials are that I am mutuals with quite a few niche internet micro celebrities. I love to go hiking, and that's really about it. And this, yeah, my avatar is something called a Brocken Spectre. It's an optical illusion that when you're on the top of certain mountains with the right conditions, if you look opposite the sun, you'll see this cool aura halo effect of your shadow, and I think it's pretty cool. It manifests my feeling that I'm not real, and that I don't know, I'm just a being of light on this mountain. So I'm into it. That's why it's my avatar, Love. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome for me asking, and you know what? I couldn't actually agree more. I think we all are beings of light, spiritual beings, whatever you want to call it. But I know, Gennady, you would disagree. But I think that, Gennady, you would meet up a little bit between Weird Hiker and Ryan O'Shea. Not that I'm saying Ryan does not do athletics. You look like a very handsome, virile individual, so by no means am I saying that. But I know that, Gennady, you do a lot of semi-hiking yourself. You do a lot of running, right, around the canyon. So I think you can resonate with Weird Hiker's enjoyment of the outdoors.
Yes, indeed. In fact, I ran an ultra marathon this past Saturday, a 50-kilometer race with almost 6,000 feet of elevation gain.
Fantastic.
In a hailstorm.
That's awesome, man.
Nice. Well, this is what I'm talking about. Like, people have this impression that the transhumanist people are like these nerds that just sit in the basement. Meanwhile, I bet that a lot of the people who write about that stuff, who are like, Standing, BAP and all these people, like, how many of them are living in the basement, as opposed to going out and being virile like Gennady over here. And I'm sure like Ryan as well. Ryan,
I'm on
do
the
you
second
do any
floor of a house right now, so I am definitely not in the basement.
There we go. Perfect. That is a couple of levels up. Good for you. So let's get started about transhumanism. Ryan, you have a lot of negative things to say about transhumanism today. So why don't you get us started on what your big critiques are?
Sure, and I'm in an interesting position here where I'm like hoping that I lose this debate because I think there's a lot of great points that can be made against me. So let's see if they're brought up. But essentially, I think transhumanists often portray themselves as rational thinkers focused more on scientific truths than faith or their biases. But really, I think an argument could be made that transhumanism is just a proto-religion, much like ancient religions, where there's a hope for salvation. You know, Christians seek salvation and everlasting life through Jesus, and I think transhumanists seek it largely through technology. And they have their own holy texts and scriptures. I think an example of that might be The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. And they have gatherings and conferences in which they discuss the scripture and how they are seeking to embody that text in their lives and how to prepare for this coming singularity, which I think has some pretty clear parallels to the second coming and the rapture. And sure, a transhumanist might point out that their beliefs are focused on trends and scientific truths, like Moore's Law, for example, or something like that, more than these old religions are. But are they really taking that progress to its rational and logical end when they talk about exponential curves and the coming event horizon of the singularity? And I'm not so sure that they are. You know, when they talk about eradicating diseases and aging, are they just using cherry-picked data points from nematode studies or mouse studies that don't apply at all to humans and trying to cling to that little bit of data for hope in something that's really not going to happen? I think I'll let you decide on that. But in the meantime, I think it's very important to, for example, look at the list of existential risks that we are facing as a species. They are things like climate change because of our use of technology and its impact on the environment, or artificial general intelligence and a paperclip maximizer situation. And there's nuclear war and designer pathogens that can make COVID-19 look like nothing. And it's much more deadly and transmissible. Or self-replicating nanotechnology that essentially becomes gray goo and wipes everything out. And if you look at these existential risks, they are all examples of technology and science running haywire and ending humanity. And transhumanists say they want to usher in a positive future and extending human health span and lifespan. And I'll admit that science and technology has done a lot to make our lives better. There's a lot of benefits. We are broadcasting live on the internet right now over, I assume, thousands of miles in some cases. And that's great. That's technology and science being used for good, I would say. But ultimately, these are existential risks that we're facing, and technology is a root of that. And let's look at the Fermi paradox, for example, which deals with the reality that, based on statistics and probability, we should see evidence of alien life out there, right? With as many planets as there are, it should exist. We don't see that alien civilization, and perhaps the reason for that is of a great filter, a science or technology discovery that ended their civilization. And if humans are on that same trajectory, that's what's going to happen to us as well. And I think there's a very strong argument for that. And this makes complete sense to me. And I don't want humans or Earth more broadly to be another entry on that list of extinct civilizations or dead planets. And I think that most transhumanists are well-meaning, good people. I'm sure that Gennady is just fine person. I just think that their pseudo-religious quest for salvation might accidentally bring about the opposite. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Very interesting. Weird Hiker, what is your retort to what Ryan... Oh, and before your retort to what Ryan has to say, real quick, our super chat is temporarily down, but we really want you to sneed those super chats over here, which I'm definitely going to answer. So what you have to do is go to streamlabs.com/breaktherules and go there and write in your super chat via PayPal, and I am going to answer anything you guys have. So, well, within limits, of course. So I want to say that, and also Robot Rudy says, Gennady, let me on your Minecraft server. So, I don't know, Gennady, that's completely up to you, but just wanted to throw that out there. So, anyway, Weird Hiker, your response.
Well, I would say that technology it's got some downsides, you know, it could potentially kill us all. But I think that, you know, we really just need to, we really should just keep going at it. We shouldn't be afraid, because the alternative is that we're just all gonna die anyways. You know, we need to see what'll happen. We need to we need to get these computers going. We need to solve all. We can probably solve all these problems. I mean, like if we create an AI or something like that, some sort of general intelligence that can create itself, upgrade itself, then I think we're pretty good. I think that even if that wipes out life on Earth, even like let's say you're right. Let's say it kills all of the humans. Let's say that we create a gray goo machine and wipes out life on Earth because we're too inefficient. It maximizes all of our carbon into something else. Like, who are we to say that that's not the next stage of life? I mean, is technology supernatural? I mean, no, it's still obeying the same laws of physics. It's still a part of the natural world. It's still nature. So who are we to say that our form of life is better somehow instead of just simply allowing life to flourish? Maybe this gray goo thing is just the next process. Maybe the Fermi paradox is the way it is, but I think that there's no sense in stopping. I think that that's completely counterproductive.
Well, if we're speaking about nature here, Ryan, where do you see being a differentiation between a nature as far as the things that grow and even the things that can be selectively bred versus a kind of nature that ends up being destructive to the experience of being alive? Where would you see the differentiation here as far as what Weird Hiker is talking about?
Yeah, one thing that I think I noticed is that many transhumanists seem to see a divide between the natural world and the animal kingdom and humans. And I don't think that's a divide that should exist. I think we need to recognize our place on that in the animal kingdom and as a common ancestor of Earth that we share with dogs and cats and all the animals. We're all evolved from the same organisms. And I think we need to appreciate that and not have this kind of anthropomorphic egocentrism where I think we give ourselves too much credit for thinking we know enough to make good decisions. I think it's pretty clear that we don't have that much information. We're not that smart, and although we aspire to be, I think we're kind of setting ourselves up for failure. And I think a lot of our quests, they do end in failure. And I think Weird Hiker brought up some interesting points there, which if I understood correctly, was essentially that, pursuing science and technology might end in disaster, but oh well, that's the natural order of things. And I think we need a little bit more conservatism there. I think life is important. Life is valuable. I think many transhumanists might agree with that perspective. So I want them to try to preserve it. That's what they claim they want to do, right? So let's go ahead and try to preserve humanity in the best way that we can, which in some cases maybe isn't going full speed ahead into AGI and space exploration and burning as much carbon as we can to increase the gross domestic product and build technology. Maybe that's not the way for us to live in harmony with nature and the animals.
Real quick, we got a super chat from Super Iron Bob who says, Sneed, Sneed, Sneed. This is why I changed my background to Sneed over here. Sneed over, you see where he is. This is Sneed. Even though the writer said that the other guy, Chuck, is actually Sneed, I don't care for that interpretation. I think that this is Sneed right over here, baby. So anyway, I just want to say that regarding Sneed, he is a character that exemplifies traditionalism within the meme universe. And Chuck is somebody who instead wants to, have instead of a farm, some kind of a strip club with sex acts, but Sneed wants to convert it back into feeding and seeding, something that is natural for the environment and the animals. And he, just like you said, Ryan, he is an example. Sneed is an example of somebody who is in touch with that part of nature that a lot of people are not. But getting back to the subject at hand, when it comes to certain things that transhumanists did, would you be able to say certain examples of a kind of like a situation of Icarus, if you will, that you see with certain people within the transhumanist community, people who, let's say, may be too overly ambitious, wanting to do a particular thing, and would you be able to say what those certain projects may be and how you may anticipate they would end in absolute failure?
I think we've seen a lot of that right now over the past year with the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, we have an established medical ethics history of the Hippocratic Oath and first do no wrong and make sure that you're not harming your patients. And now there are people talking about human challenge trials and intentionally infecting people with COVID-19 for the sake of what? Bringing a dangerous vaccine to market quicker so that Pfizer can get more billions of dollars? I don't know about that. I mean, we've been dealing with pathogens and diseases for millennia. We've evolved alongside it. I think Weird Hiker might agree with me with the point he made earlier that if that's the natural course of things and some people die in the process, you know, that's just nature. And I think that's one of the cases. And transhumanists, I think, are the ones that are very much advocating for the proactive principle against the precautionary principle. They want to throw the precautionary principle out the window and essentially offer up people to be sacrifices to technological progress and advancement. And I don't know if that's right. I think we need to take care of people and we shouldn't throw out medical ethics just because people want to live forever.
What would be your response, Weird Hiker? And by the way, we have the poll on the screen. I am going to link to the poll as well in the chat, so everybody be sure to let us know who you think is winning. So, Weird Hiker, what would be your response to that, my friend?
Well, first of all, as a dedicated transhumanist, I am also a strict, completely individualistic libertarian, and I just have to say that anybody, we're going to be, we're not treating people as guinea pigs here. Okay, these are all consenting. Okay, consent. I'm emphasizing consent here. These are consenting consumers who are acting within their own rational interests. Okay. So I think that we can go down into this rabbit hole of these unintended consequences. You know, people live in a society, so on and so forth. But I really want to respond to that point. I did have something. You know, going back a little bit. Ryan, you said that we need to pump the brakes a little bit. We need to watch where we're going. We need to be a little bit conservative here. And I just have to say that. We've got all these crises coming on that are about to crash the whole dang thing. We've got this climate change coming down the pipe. We've got a peak resources situation. Maybe we find more oil, but phosphorus is something that we're running out of. We're starting to hit some hard limits here, and I'd say the only answer is all gas, no brakes, baby. This is a Hail Mary. We need to just pump that. We need to get it going. We need to put all of our resources into getting to Mars, making colonies. We need to create a general AI. This is the one chance. That's what it is. I mean, I don't know what else to say there. We've got a closing window and we got to get through that window.
And by the way, I just made a new poll right now because these things confuse me. I accidentally put the check mark of approval on Ryan and the X on Weird Hiker. So I flipped it upside down. I'm going to post a new link to the poll. So there we go. And Bruce Bogtrotter says, this poll discriminates against the portion of your audience that is banned from Twitter. Well, I'm sorry. What are you going to do? You're just going to have to make a new account. Okay, it's not that hard. Use Tor or whatever. So Ryan, what would be your response to Weird Hiker?
Yeah, I am also sometimes getting confused here. So if I start advocating for transhumanism, just let me know. So yeah, I think Weird Hiker pointed out there that, he wants to be an individual and pursue his own rational self-interest. And transhumanists are quick to point that out. And they talk about that they heavily support and defend the idea of bodily autonomy and that it should be up to the individual or their caretaker in those cases to consent to any augmentations or enhancements, and that nothing should be mandated or forced on people who prefer to remain biological and natural. And that all sounds great and that sounds fine. And I understand why they use those talking points. But at the end of the day, if you are a student in class and your classmates have been augmented to have super intelligence, or you're in the labor force seeking a job, and your competitors use exoskeletons that increase their abilities, or nootropics that increase their focus and cognitive abilities, or you're an athlete playing against competitors that have modified genetics and advanced vision. These are the realities of the situation that you won't be able to compete. How do you earn a living? How do you build a life for yourself in a society in which, as Yuval Noah Harari might say, you are a useless that has been replaced by advanced beings working hand in hand and alongside AI and advanced technology that are connected directly to Wikipedia and the internet. You can't compete with that. So while they might say, oh, you have a choice, it's your own personal decision at the end of the day, no one is forcing you. If you want to have a role in society, you're going to have to augment yourself, whether you want to or not. And we need to be aware of that.
But just to push back a little bit on this, and I want Weird Hiker to go ahead, I'm not going to take a lot of time, but when it comes to that free will of, do we go with the flow? Like, there would have been probably some people that would have preferred to still have the horse and buggy, or people who would have preferred to still live in caves. How do we decide where exactly is the willpower of sovereignty of when it comes to what exactly the human body and the human mind is exposed to? Where would you personally say, Ryan, that sovereignty lies, the red line that can never be crossed, that you may perhaps see transhumanism encroaching upon, eventually forcing people into a situation where it is going to get crossed?
Yeah, I would say one of those differences might be when you cross the barrier of the skin and enter the body. For example, if there's two men and one is riding a horse and one is walking, or I don't want to make this gender specific, there's two people, one's riding a horse and one's walking, you take the horse away, they're largely equal again. If you have modified your genes to be incredibly superhuman fast and intelligent and have more capabilities, no matter what technology you take away externally to them, there's still an inherent built-in benefit. So I think that's where the benefit lies. The difference really lies there in that, sure, people can use faster cars to go faster, but that's a technology that, at least theoretically, everyone has access to and could choose to get in and drive. When you're talking about even designer babies, where not even yourself, but your parents decided to make you superhuman and super capable, that crosses a line right there. There's no competing with that.
Weird Hiker, that seems to be pretty convincing as far as not crossing such a sacred line. But is it that sacred? I mean, what would you say in response?
Well, I would say that we already have this problem. I mean, it's unfortunate that certain folks can, afford better natal health care, for example. Their baby's going to have a higher IQ if if they are eating better when they're pregnant and so on and so forth. It's something that already exists, and I would say, for a lot of as an analogy to my kind of Hail Mary argument from before, this is something where we're looking at problems that are pretty much fundamental to nature. Now, maybe introducing new technologies is going to exacerbate this inequality, but there's a potential that we could allow for, hear me out, CRISPR welfare. Okay, so we offer free CRISPR kits. I mean, you are free to not CRISPR your baby, but we'll do universal basic CRISPR babies. Okay, anybody has the option to do it. It's safe, it's ethical, and we're gonna do everything we can to make sure that this is as equitable as possible.
But why would you say that it is, I mean, I'm not even going to talk about safety yet, because first of all, how the hell would you even prove right now that something like that could be safe? But as far as ethics go, this is definitely crossing Ryan's red line over here, wouldn't you agree? Like, how would you be able to justify changing something so fundamental to the human? Weird Hiker, what do you think?
It's again, I think that we're getting stuck on this fundamental change when there's already plenty of technology that allows for people, for example, to test for certain congenital birth defects, and they can detect that in a fetus, and if they want, they can give up on the pregnancy. So we're already doing this. There's already this eugenic function going on. And
there already is, but okay, I'm not going to speak. Ryan, there already is, but if you were to say whatever I may be thinking, let's see if we coincide here. So how would you retort to that?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to say exactly what you're thinking, but I think a part of what Weird Hiker said there is fundamentally flawed, right? There's an idea there that these flaws that we see in humanity are easily fixed with genetic modification. And all we need to do is tweak a couple of letters in your DNA sequence and you're not good as new, you're better than ever. And I think that's inherently a little bit misguided. I think humans are more complex than that. And I think transhumanists would be among the first to agree with me that humans are flawed. Obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have anything to change. And many of them understand that we are, this might be a loaded term or too heavy of a term here, but a lot of us are essentially slaves to our biology and our environment and other things that we do not and could not possibly have had a role in creating or bringing about. We're the result of neurochemicals and our microbiome and our genetics and mammalian instincts and our limbic system and our lizard brain. We don't have a role over any of that. And I think it's very egotistical to think that we can use our limbic system and our mammalian instincts, and while we're constantly fighting the urge to rape and kill each other, which we have genetically passed down to us, that we can build a better future by editing our DNA. I don't know if that's going to work. I'm not sure if we can use our broken brain to create better brains. To me, that it's flawed from the beginning.
Well, why do you think it's flawed?
Well, for example, let's say that there is... All right, I know where I'm going with this now. So let's say that the transhumanists succeed in their future. There are humans that are indefinitely healthy in solar systems around the galaxy with massive control of abundant energy that can do basically anything they want. Are those humans or post-humans in that scenario still going to be subject to the microbiome and neurochemistry and mammalian instincts that we have today, or would they have overcome that? If they haven't overcome that, I'm not sure that future is sustainable. I think it's going to collapse, likely an annihilation and self-destruction from human-on-human violence. If they did overcome that, that might be even worse. Because at that point, are they even human? And what culture and value do they have without, I think, what really makes us us?
Well, why do you think that would disappear? And then I'm going to go back to Weird Hiker. Why do you think that this us that makes us us would disappear when we have all of this transhumanistic quality being added on top of the model through gene editing and so on and so forth?
Well, what is it that makes us human? I think that's a question that we really should have defined at the beginning of what is a human. And the question is really, are we at risk of losing whatever that is in a transhumanist future? You know, we argue and we get sad and we fail and we face heartache and depression and fear. And those are negative emotions and extremely negative things. But I think they also provide us opportunities for growth, and they might make life fuller, and they make the highs and the joys even more powerful and meaningful. And I can't imagine a future in which literally none of those negative emotions exist. And I know there are people like David Pierce, for example, who actually want to bring about this future in which suffering is abolished. And if there is no suffering and there is no pain and there is no fear or heartache, is there humanity? Did we lose whatever it is that makes us us? And in losing the lows, do we inherently lose the highs? That's what I'm worried about. And I don't think transhumanists are giving that enough credit.
Weird Hiker, how would you respond to that?
Well, I would like to say that I would say humans are inherently technological. We've evolved alongside our technology. For millions of years, we've been breaking stones into thinner, sharper stones, and then we, domesticated animals. We domesticated plants. We learned to control fire, and all along this time, our body plan has been changing alongside our technology. So I think that we are inherently technological. And to say, oh, I'm afraid what will happen to us if we adopt said technology, it's really forgetting what it means to a transhumanist like me, at least, to be human, which is to be a technology user.
So where would you personally limit this kind of growth? And when it comes to what Ryan was talking about as far as happiness, do you have any qualms about the potential wirehead's future that humanity may be under? For those who don't know that reference, it basically means if people are going to be artificially stimulated all the time, if we have all these gooners who desire nothing more than to just goon out. Actually, Ryan, do you know what gooners are by any chance?
I don't know that term, no.
Okay, I will explain what gooners are. So, in the world of the internet, a gooner is somebody who would achieve a lot of pleasure from being stimulated by multiple monitors showing erotic acts, and at the same time prolonging the feeling of self-pleasure without ending it. If I could put it mildly, because I don't want to go blue here. But you know what I mean. That is what a gooner is. That is when a gooner does. A gooner lives to goon, for the sake of gooning. So my concern here would be if there were gooners who would want nothing more than to keep that feeling of pleasure forever and ever and not want to do anything else. They basically, in a way, wouldn't they forfeit their life? I mean, Ryan, you could probably make that point as well that I'm making here, but I want to ask Weird Hiker as well. So, Ryan, where do you stand on this gooning situation? Are you with me here that could be a really big problem?
I don't know the specifics of the gooning. I'm not as immersed in that culture as it seems that you may be. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of things that could be lost here with humans. Okay, look at the I'm forgetting the term right now. What is the name of the term where people are like plugged into a fictional reality that they're convinced is real? What's that?
Matrix?
No, I'm going to think of it in the future. But essentially, it's like a fictional reality in which your wildest dreams are true, and you believe that they're true mentally, but you're actually not living in physical reality. The pleasure machine, Nozick's pleasure machine, or something like along those lines. But I think that's the future that it sounds like Weird Hiker might want to build, where humans are plugged into these machines in which, sure, you could be experiencing pleasure based on the neurochemicals that we know create that, but are you really experiencing that? Is that real? I'd rather live in reality. If there is pain to feel, I want to feel it, and I think that makes the experience more immersive.
Weird Hiker, why live in reality, right? Like, what do you think of that?
Well, I would say, well, first of all, going back to the gooner question, it's technology. It selects for different traits. If somebody's just gonna go off and goon for the rest of their life, that's fine.
And real quick, speaking of gooning, Super Iron Bob, another $5, thank you so much, who says, time till Lev mentions gooning this stream, approximately 30 minutes. Okay, go on, Weird Hiker.
So, as I said, people evolve alongside their technology, and if a lot of people are falling into a proclivity to gooning away their existence, then so be it. Hopefully, there will be some others who don't goon away their existence, and they will be the ones to carry the torch of humanity or techno-humanity or whatever you want to call it. So, anyways, back to the reality thing. I think that this is, again, our own conception of reality is something that has changed over the course of history, and it is also changed with our technological conditions. So I don't think that there's good steady ground to claim that there's this sort of solid reality that you can say is better than whatever experience of reality people 200 years in the future, when they have they've got their advanced gooning setups on Jupiter, and they have their KFC soybean.
Well, they'll rename it to Jupiter, but go on.
Yeah, Jupiter. That was basically my point. Is that I feel like there's a we're falling down a little rabbit hole here with one type of reality, where it changes. Our experience of it changes over time with our technology.
And Ryan, how would you respond?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I Googled it during the talk there. I was referring to Nozick's experience machine, You can read about it later, but I think I described it fairly well. Essentially, yeah, I think the idea, now we're getting even further removed, where transhumanists not only want to build future abilities for themselves, they want to build future realities for themselves. I think that's a whole nother level removed from even where I thought this conversation would go. Now it sounds like Weird Hiker is saying that every single person perhaps could be existing in their own simulated virtual environment of whatever they want, which is fine if some people want to do that, more power to them. But I don't know if that's good for humanity going forward. He mentioned that perhaps some people would hopefully carry that torch forward. Who would? If you can plug yourself into the machine and truly authentically believe that you are living the best life imaginable for yourself, and to you it seems real, why would you want to unplug from that and experience the harsh realities of the universe that we live in? If we create this future that the transhumanists want, that might be the end of humanity, whether there's catastrophic risk or not. Transhumanism could be the catastrophic risk.
Hiker.
Well, I want to go back for a second to something you asked earlier, and hopefully I can use that to bounce into this. But before you were saying, I don't want to misconstrue your own words. You were saying something about how can we fix human problems without being humans. Is it something along those lines? I don't want to mischaracterize you.
Yeah, essentially was, we have flawed brains. We know this. I don't think we can use flawed brains to come up with the solution for flawed brains.
So how I wanted to respond to that, I think we moved past it, but I would say that that's something that a general intelligence would need to be able to solve. And in a sense, it's not an intelligence that's separate from us. We birthed it. It is, in a very real way, something that has descended from our own intelligence. And in the case of this risk of everyone losing a shared reality, I think that this is another thing that would need to be mediated by something greater than a human.
I could see that being the case. I think that's a fair response to that. The question is, something has to create the AGI. That thing is going to be humans. Are we capable of ushering in a benevolent AGI that would take humans under its super advanced wing and usher us into a happy future? I don't know the likelihood of that. I do know a lot of AI researchers think it's not very likely, and they think that we're on the path to destruction by even pulling at those strings. And that gets back to kind of my opening statement and the very first point I made. Perhaps there's a small chance that the transhumanist dream can come true. And you sound very techno-optimist there by talking about the savior AGI that will come and make life better even if humans can't. I don't know if that's likely. I think the AGI might look at us as we look at ants and just not care about humans or our well-being whatsoever and go do their own AGI things that we're not even on a level of understanding. And to be honest, that makes perfect sense to me.
But you warned me earlier on, Ryan, that if you go into transhumanism further away, from the chain that you are strapped to while you're reverse debating for me to say something, and I think you've kind of done it now with AGI. So to push it back, would you perhaps be so kind as to think about perhaps Uncle Ted's wise words when it comes to us going in these directions altogether? Wouldn't it perhaps be, and I don't want to push you this if you don't want to, but maybe for the sake of considering undoing this whole thing altogether and just going full Anprim like Ted Kaczynski wanted to? Like, would you see any benefit there?
I don't know. I think, while if you really want to go down that string, maybe life got a lot worse right as soon as the agricultural revolution happened, right? We were fairly happy hunter-gatherers living in our small bands of people that we knew the names of, and we were, comfortable in that environment. That's what our brains were evolved for. That's where we succeeded. And now we need these technologically mediated experiences where we save people's numbers into our phones and we don't recognize faces and names anymore because we know way too many people and we can't keep relationships straight. And the internet is just this meme complex that we can't wrap our heads around. And no single person has an understanding of society or their role in it anymore. And I think that's harmful to us mentally. So in some sense, yeah, going back to smaller bands of family units gathered together with shared characteristics and a common goal and sharing resources away from these large metropolitan groups where we're not meant to live these lives we're living today. And transhumanists want to take that even further. And even if they think they want that, I'm not sure that their brains can mentally handle it. And I think they know that's the case. And that's why they also talking about upgrading and changing and increasing the bandwidth of the human mind. They know that they're not built for these environments. So instead of wanting to build environments that humans are made for, they just want to change humans.
Interesting. Weird hiker. How would you respond to that?
Well, I would say that the very essence of technology is to better deal with one's environment. So and at the same time, I don't think that there's a clear line between the tool and the user. I mean, you could shoot, I don't have the article or whatever on hand, but they did this study on monkeys, right, where they put little probes in their brains, and when they used rakes and pliers, they lit up in a way that they were literally using their fingers and hands. Like their brains, their tools were essentially just their hands and fingers. So I think that it's a little wrong to assume that there's anything incorrect about simply changing the environment. I mean, that's what we've been doing for millions of years.
But would there be a certain point where you would say this is taking people to such an extent that, and I guess it goes back to what we were talking about before, they would completely lose touch with what it means to be human, and their life experience would be such that they would experience just absolute isolation and misery, and that whatever we were meant to do on this planet, assuming you believe that we were meant to do something, that it would just go totally wrong and haywire?
I think that is a question for the true inheritors of this technology to answer. I think from our perspective, there's no way to truly answer that question. I think it's like asking Homo erectus about the internet. It's just, especially considering how rapidly things are changing, and human beings are evolving rapidly as well. I mean, we've diverged and changed a whole lot since the outbreak of agriculture and of quite a few other civilizational changes. So I would say that we're just not really positioned to really know that answer. I don't think that anyone can really answer that.
Ryan, can anybody answer that? And also, the great Alexandra Plotnik was asking, how do you define happiness? So from the position of somebody who would want to secure an existence of the kind of human way of life, how would you define happiness regarding that?
So this is off the top of my head because I haven't given it a ton of thought, but I would say that you don't get a fulfilled life from happiness. You get happiness from a fulfilled life. And as long as you are living alongside and in concert with your biological desires and your needs, and you're getting those met, and you have that social interaction and family structure and love and things that we've evolved to care about that keeps us alive, I think that's where happiness is generated from. And I'd love to hear Weird Hiker's take on that as well. Where would happiness come from that perspective? Because from what I'm hearing, it sounds like you can't be happy with the current human situation and the biological limitations that you're facing. You need to move beyond that. We need to use science and technology to achieve happiness, because we're not at a level yet where that's possible. And I'd like to hear if Weird Hiker might agree with that or disagree.
Well, I would say that happiness is, like anything, simply a material phenomenon, and we can simply change our brain chemistry to be happy. I don't think that. I think that, especially considering the direction the world is going, and the potential crises, that we should really be shifting our idea of happiness as a species to something that's a little bit more sustainable. Quite frankly, because we're going to need to be making some sacrifices if we're going to diversify our eggs and keep, they're all in one basket right now, and unfortunately this is kind of an outdated idea of happiness, in my opinion.
But why? What's the point? What's the point of all of this technological progression ultimately?
Well, the point is excellence. It's to improve. It's to expand.
Why? Why?
It's what life does. It's the will to live. It's what all to borrow a term from our friend Mr. Kaczynski, the worst pen pal in the world. It's a self-propagating system. It's something that wants to propagate itself and expand as far as it can, and use as much resources as it can. That's all forms of life.
At the expense of the actual experience within, because the animals, from what I understand, they've got their instincts, they're living in the kind of dream state, if you will, as well as certain primitive tribes out there, and they do have a certain level, I think, of satisfaction of the kind of way that they live. With the rat experiment that was done, what was it, Mouse Utopia? It was called. They demonstrated what would happen if you seclude creatures within this enclosed environment where everything is given to them that they could possibly want, and we already see what the results are of that. And I know that there is a difference between humans and rats, but then again, how much of a difference is there really? So what would you say as far as, sure, we live to propagate, but the creatures that propagate, they propagate in such a way that they make use of their own internal resources. But as far as having these external resources be used against us, I mean, I don't know, like, I want Ryan to also bring his input here as we are closing into the final round until we put the masks off, but that would just be what I would add to that. Ryan, would you like to add anything to what I just said in relation to the Mouse Utopia and all that stuff?
Yeah, what you brought up there with the rat park experiments, I think is very interesting. Based on the findings of that study, these rats that had access to everything they could possibly want ended up using their time basically getting rat high and wasted their lives away. And I worry that could be the future that it sounds like Weird Hiker might want to build for humans. Now, I should put a disclaimer there that later studies that tried to replicate the rat park experiment had some difficulties doing that. Those findings have been called into question. But I think it's quite clear that what Weird Hiker is saying is that, sure, if you can wirehead yourself to experience nothing but happiness, regardless of what's actually happening in the world, then he doesn't see a problem with that. See, I think we do have a role to play. As humans, we have a responsibility for our families or our children or the environment in general. I think we should strive to make the world better for others. And if transhumanists put themselves in this experience machine and shut themselves off from reality, they can feel like they're the best people in the world, but what are they actually doing? What are they accomplishing with your lives? And I think it was quite telling there when you asked the Weird Hiker the why, it ended up being because there's this innate biological urge to expand and progress. And that's exactly what I'm saying. We have this limbic system and mammalian instincts that we can't overcome, that we know are illogical, that we're just pursuing for the sake of pursuing. And I think Weird Hiker said the same thing right there. It's a drive of biological urges that we should really question and think about further.
Weird Hiker, before we take the masks off, I would love to hear your response to what Ryan had to say. And everybody subscribe, and keep on subscribing so that we grow. So Weird Hiker, go for it, buddy.
Sure. So I would say that this happiness, it does come, there is that risk that introducing these technologies to people is going to create the rat pushing the cocaine button over and over again. And there's a possibility that happens, but we need to be pragmatic here as well, because we may be entering a world where there isn't enough space for as many people now. We need to live in little pod worlds up in Alaska because everything else is desert, right? So a lot of people are frankly going to be needing to be plugged into these whatever you'd like to call them, ancestor simulations or so on and so forth, where they don't really know where they are, but they think that they're living a natural life. They could be on a farm with a homestead and a beautiful family. They could be hunter-gatherers, whatever they want to be. They could be living a endless hedonic goon cave experience, and we could be using the rest of their brain processing for mining cryptocurrency, for example.
Ryan, do you see something evil about that?
Yeah, I think there is value in life, and I think Weird Hiker seems to want to shut the door to that. I think there's a lot of potential in the human experiences, and there's value in that. And I do want to live a long time. I don't know if I want to live indefinitely, because at the end of the day, if you can just strap yourself into an experience machine, what's the point? What does it matter at all? I think we're losing the value in life if we pursue what Weird Hiker is talking about, and I think we need to preserve that.
Well, that's an important thing you made that I actually don't want to jump over and forget. One of the big tenets of transhumanism is life extension, not extinction, which we did not cover yet. So I just wanted to quickly go to Weird Hiker. Would you then advocate for a longer life, indefinite life, not just within the machine, but outside of the machine perhaps? And what do you see as the benefit, and where would you put the limit on living a long time?
Well, if all goes to plan, everybody can live forever, as long as we keep expanding to new planets and creating space stations, and we create a Dyson sphere to use up the entire solar system as a resource, then we can have that for everyone. The question is if we're willing to make the short-term sacrifices for the long-term gains. That's, like I said, it's that Hail Mary. We can't have any hesitation. We have a limited window to make it through this little challenge that we're at here, the Fermi paradox. We got to get through that great filter. We need to put all our eggs in one basket and just go for it. That's what I say.
And Ryan, what do you see as the danger there? And we're going to remove our masks really soon.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with wanting to live longer. Where I see the problem is the externalities that go along with that. We have a finite land space as of right now because we don't have any space colonies yet. There's already talk of overpopulation and resource depletion, and there's concerns of immortal dictators, for example. What if the kings of medieval Europe never died? What if they never ceded power? What if the workers never retired and there was never any job openings? I think there's a lot of economic realities that humanity just in society isn't ready for when it comes to indefinite life extension or health span extension. It's just not something that we are capable of working with yet. And sure, we could try to build a system in which takes those things into account, but will we succeed in that? And will we succeed in that in time? But my major criticism is just that indefinite life extension could stagnate growth in progress. I'm worried that new generations with fresh ideas will never be able to make it to the levels of wealth accumulation or power or influence that they would need to have their ideas be heard or take effect when there's people from centuries ago who have had more time to accumulate wealth and influence presiding that over them. I think that's a major risk.
And would you also give anything, before I go to Weird Hiker for the final point, would you give anything to the idea of God, the idea of reincarnation, the idea of an afterlife, the idea that there are more experiences to be had of the experiencer without necessarily having to rely on this particular experience that we are in at the moment?
Yeah, I think a lot of the criticisms that I've made so far of transhumanism are very, they don't depend on any specific religious beliefs or creeds, but specifically perhaps a Christian might look at the idea of transhumanists want to overcome their biological limitations and live forever as playing God. You know, there are large swaths of this population that believe we already have indefinite life and amazing capabilities, and it's through this omnipotent, omniscient creator, and that by humans trying to unseat that God, which I think is a saying that they use often, they literally say they want to become like gods or become God. That's playing a game that I think a lot of people aren't comfortable playing and might even say is blasphemous.
Interesting. Weird Hiker, you've got the final response, and then it's mask taken off time right on schedule. It is 8:57.
Well, I would say that one of the things that has kept humanity down for thousands of years is this belief in antiquated superstitions such as God and all these things. For example, we went thousands of years with no iPhones, no Funko Pops, no high fructose corn syrup, and with these with these innovations, what could the ancient Greeks have done if they had a Tesla car and they could plug it in? So just imagine that. That's my final thought.
Okay, had to be a smart ass right at the end. That's fine. No,
so I have to say something
yes.
that reminded me of, and I am essentially revealing my age here by saying in the 1990s there was a game called Age of Empires, and
I love that
Empires, one could play as any of a number of civilizations ranging from essentially hunter-gatherer times to the era of late antiquity, so the Roman Empire. But there was a cheat code that one could type into the game where instead of having to essentially just honestly build up one's military and overcome the opponent, there would be this car that manifests itself and it fires lasers, and you could have this car essentially rampage throughout the map. So that's, I think, what Weird Hiker's comments reminded me of the laser car in Age of Empires. What could the ancient Greeks have done with that?
Yeah, I'm trying to get that for everybody, and these reactionary Luddites are trying to hold back human progress.
You remember there was also a guy there who said, "Now that's a good idea. I would really like to see that. Now that's a good idea." Do you remember that guy? He was like I think he was like a monk or a monkey man character who used to like walk real fast. Do you know who I'm talking about, Gennady? He was another secret character.
Yeah, there was also some sort of flying creature. There was a few other like weird units that made no sense. Like
Saboteur. I remember Saboteur, but that's kind of regular. But anyway, Remus, thank you so much for joining us again, buddy. And Gennady, glad to hear you finally speaking because it is mask off time. It is 9 p.m. I want to thank Ryan and Weird Hiker for keeping the masks on. I thought you did really well, but I want to hear from Gennady and Remus, as well as Astral. Astral, where are you? Please come in the chat, as well as Geo. Geo, buddy, I hope you can come in as well. And before that, I just want to quickly say, tomorrow we are doing something really special for Friday. We are going to have a stream talking about Berserk. So for those who don't know, Kentaro Miura, the great mangaka creator of Berserk, he passed away quite recently. The news just broke out yesterday night. And we are going to be doing a stream about Berserk. Definitely spoilers included there, but this is going to be only for our patrons. So this is on patreon.com/breaktherules. Here is the link right to this, right to where the stream is going to be. Inside there's going to be a link to the unlisted stream as well as to the Zoom link, scheduled Zoom link. So all our patrons, all of you guys can go in there and can join us in the conversation, as well as anybody who wants to be a patron. Now is your chance. Patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron. Get access to our very first Patreon-only stream, the first of many that is happening tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So I just wanted to let everybody know about that. And also on my own channel, we are going to have a show on Sunday, another Lev stream, art stream with Bimbo Urumensch and Sonia supposedly. I'm very excited about that one. Here is the link to that. Be sure to go there. And you're also going to see a link at the end of this episode. You are going to see a link to the progress episode that we're going to have. And I'm going to announce some of the people that are going to be on that one. We are going to have, and Gennady, you may know some of these people. We're going to have Samuel Hammond, who has the privilege of having the Twitter account at Ham and Cheese, and he is the director of poverty and welfare policy. He is a pluralist, and he works at the Niskanen Center. So I don't know if you guys heard of the Niskanen Center or not.
The Niskanen Center? Yes, I've heard of them.
Yeah, how would you describe them? What exactly would you say they are?
I would say they are essentially more centrist-leaning libertarians. So they advocate libertarian-esque policy ideas, but within a framework that could potentially appeal to more mainstream politicians. That's how I would characterize them.
Excellent. We definitely need more people like that on Break the Rules, and we actually had recently an episode with people from Davos and the author of 10% Less Democracy, and that was a very interesting one. I highly recommend you all to check it out. But also, we are going to have on that stream Hotep Sophia, we are going to have Nigel Carlsbad, and we are also going to have from South Africa, let me just see his name over here, it's a Karakal, let me just see. I think Weird Hiker, you know who I'm talking about, right? Conscious Karakal. So Conscious Karakal is also joining us on that stream, as well as Catherine Brodsky and Leonella Wired Isotope. She is going to be back. So look out for that one. You are going to see a link to that one right after this stream is ended, so be sure to set a reminder. But anyway, Gennady, how do you think Ryan did against transhumanism, and how do you think Weird Hiker? And then I'm going to go to Remus. And Astral Flight, get in here. Where are you?
All right, well, thank you, Lev, for the opportunity to observe this most interesting debate. And I think it was a valuable exercise because, of course, one of the best ways to understand a position is to try to figure out what could be some of the most powerful arguments against it. And of course, Ryan is quite an active transhumanist, and I think he did an admirable job in his comments in that he accurately characterized transhumanism in criticizing it. And I think that's what every critic of transhumanism should try to do. When you criticize something, make sure that you have a correct understanding of the position that you're opposing, because otherwise you are attacking a straw man. Now, I did see in Ryan, and I think this was intentional and it was done subtly, and I think it was effective in this way, in that in criticizing transhumanism, Ryan, by explicating some of its elements, actually implicitly pointed out how transhumanism might solve the problems that Ryan was attributing to it. For example, the issues of existential risk that Ryan described are actually a key concern of many transhumanists. And many transhumanists, when hearing Ryan's characterizations of those existential risks, will essentially say, yes, we've thought about that and discussed that within our community extensively. And here is our more nuanced outlook on how probable or improbable each of those risks are and what possible solutions, possible ways to mitigate or avert those risks might be. And I think Ryan's technique often involved a lot of this compliment by criticism type of approach. It's as if I were to say to you, Lev, well, Lev, you need to do a lot of work on your artistic skills, because you might be the greatest artist of your generation, but you have nothing on Leonardo da Vinci. So is that really at all worthy of being called an artist? If I were to make that kind of argument. There's a lot of praise implicit in that. And I think in many cases, that's almost unavoidable if you ask somebody to intentionally take on a position that they're opposing. But also in these kinds of situations, it can be used to great effect. So good work, Ryan. You were put in a very interesting position given what I know to be your actual views. Now I will move on to Weird Hiker. I think Weird Hiker ended up advocating for a version of transhumanism, or rather an amalgamation of positions that are sometimes attributed from the outside to transhumanists. And then he attempted to essentially make the best claims he could for why those positions are valid or justified. I think sometimes he went quite a bit beyond what actual transhumanists would consider to be acceptable outcomes. So when he said that, oh, it's not a big deal really if humanity is eliminated, because who's to say that's not just the natural course of things, the progression of evolution. A small minority of transhumanists might believe that. Generally, they are, let's say, recent converts to transhumanism who essentially see transhumanism as a reaction against whatever they dislike in contemporary human society. So it's more of an anti-humanist position at that point. And they would say, well, humanity is flawed, so let's just replace humanity. But transhumanists who are more seasoned and have had more time to deliberate the implications of transhumanism would actually say, no, that's not going to be the outcome of these emerging technologies. The goal is not to replace humanity. The goal is to enhance humanity and indeed bring out the best elements of what it means to be human. Likewise, I think the life extensionist aspects of Weird Hiker's advocacy were more compelling than the it's okay to be wire-headed aspects of his claims, because again, I think he was taking the criticism of transhumanism that one sometimes encounters from the outside and just attempting to justify it or say it's not such a bad outcome after all. But really, transhumanists will often say technology is just a set of tools, and ultimately you don't want to be dominated by your tools. You want to use your tools to achieve the kinds of objectives that you actually consider to be worthwhile. So I think what I would have done with regard to these claims that Ryan made as the anti-transhumanist is to try to articulate how transhumanism would actually preserve those kinds of values, like leading a meaningful life or achieving happiness, not because you've essentially just changed your brain to receive an emotional high, even if the world around you is deteriorating, but actually you've transformed the world so that all of the root causes of these problems are not present. Now, I do think Weird Hiker made a lot of good points about the desirability of technological expansion as a way of solving problems and overcoming resource limitations.
It's something that wants to propagate itself and expand as far as it.
So,
oh, yes, that was Astral Flight with the audio on. Always, when you come onto this tree, make sure you turn off your audio, have your headphones in, so there's no echo. But anyway, Astral Flight, thank you so much for coming, buddy. Anyway, Gennady, go ahead.
Yes. So, essentially, one of the ideas in transhumanist discourse today is that we are in a kind of race of sorts between the positive aspects of technological progress and human creativity and human ingenuity, as well as essentially increasing stakes from various existential risks, be they the risk of nuclear war or an asteroid strike or some sort of deadly pandemic arising. And I think those were adequately brought up in the course of the discussion. Weird Hiker had essentially the beginnings of the right approach to addressing those risks from a transhumanist perspective, which is indeed one accelerates the progress of technology in the present to the extent possible given our resources, so that we essentially surge forward decisively in that race and overcome all of the risks. And really the problem with the anti-transhumanist criticism of saying, oh, technology could bring about all of these existential risks, is that if we do nothing, we're already in a situation of considerable existential risks, with nuclear warfare being quite possible today, with entirely, quote, natural existential risks, be they asteroid strikes or supervolcano eruptions, also being quite possible, just a matter of a very small probability of each of these events happening every year. Each year we wait, we risk incurring that probability. So accelerating technological progress may be our best counter against those kinds of risks. So this is where I would have placed more of my emphasis if I were in Weird Hiker's position. Also, I would say there is sometimes this perception that all transhumanists are just highly individualistic, libertarian, atheist types. And I happen to be a libertarian, individualistic atheist, but not all transhumanists are like that. And generally speaking,
I also am one, by the way. So
yes. Generally
That's
speaking,
why you guys laughing.
when I articulate a defense of transhumanism to people, I wouldn't just portray it as my own personal set of views on every single subject. I also happen to like the color blue, and I also happen to drink diet soda, but not every transhumanist does. So I do try to point out that there is a diversity of views among transhumanists, and there are some religious transhumanists. There are some transhumanists who don't take a libertarian political outlook. They may have a more what they call techno-progressive political outlook, or they may be centrists, or they may be apolitical. Some may have more communitarian leanings. So transhumanism is a bigger umbrella than that. And I actually think when advocating for transhumanism, whatever flavor of transhumanist you are, it is good to acknowledge that kind of existence of a big tent, because that way you can bring more people to identify with the ideas of transhumanism and see some merit in them, even if they might not be as sympathetic to one's own particular flavor of transhumanism. So that is my characterization of the debate. Quite an interesting experience, and good work to both of you for being willing to take on positions that you disagree with and try to characterize them and defend them to the best of your ability.
Definitely. I want to hear from Remus, and then I want to, now since the masks are off, also get some pushback from Weird Hiker, because I know you can't really stay as long as some of the other folks here. So, Remus...
I can do about another 45 minutes or so.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
so,
we got
Remus, let us know, just like Gennady did, let us know what you thought of their positions.
Well, you know, I think I don't particularly agree with the way, like, these are concepts that I agree with in theory to some degree, but mostly don't. Like, I think it would probably be horrible if there were transhumanist god people, because I don't trust people with transhumanist god power. I agreed with while listening to Ryan, he was talking about the idea of if we haven't solved the sort of like, I guess the limbic question, how are we going to be able to do this properly, because we would probably just end up killing each other, and that's my best guess as to how that would really go if that's how if that's how the future went. But I think they did a pretty good job of summing up the positions to a degree that wasn't overly, like, they weren't being caricatures, but at the same time, you could tell that they didn't agree. It was funny. It was funny to listen to them. So kind of squirm through the answers. It was pretty beautiful. I like that. But no, that was really good. It wasn't as sometimes you can get kind of ugly, but this was nice.
And by the way, Remus, I do have to say, there is something weird going on. I've noticed it lately with your audio. I'm not sure what it is. It may be a new device you're using. Do you know, is there any way that you can call back with a different device? Because this one is just...
I can try. Yeah, I can come back in. Give me a second.
Okay. Excellent, excellent. Okay, and then I want to go to Astral Flight. You are a newcomer to Break the Rules. Welcome, Astral Flight. Did you have a chance to listen to this whole thing?
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me on. Is the audio okay?
It's a little bit loud, just a bit, but it's on course.
Well, okay, I'll turn it down in a minute. Yeah, I was able to listen to most of the debate, and I thought everybody did a great job. I mean, I definitely think it would have been possible to not realize it was argue my position if I didn't know better going into it. So that's good. And you guys did a good job of not making it go off into the weeds of the technical details of the technology and science that would be necessary and that is already involved. I know one of my biggest problems with this is I do have a perspective on it, and I do have a strong opinion that is mostly in Weird Hikers camp, but I always feel with this subject kind of out of my depth, and I don't I always feel like there's probably something about the tech that I'm missing. So while I'm glad you guys did a good job of not getting too heady with that, I could probably ask a million questions just about the tech involved and where we're at. And I do intend to do so later on in the stream, ask a couple specific tech questions. I missed the very beginning, so I don't know if you did talk about that.
No, we did not really talk about that, so we could definitely go a little bit more into the weeds here. But what would you say, if anything, was missing from the things that we were considering here as far as certain problems that may arise with the advent of transhumanism? Like, was everything covered, or was there anything that you would have wanted more attention to be paid to, and if so, what would it be?
No, well, it didn't leave me wanting too much more, in the sense that I felt like you missed some big glaring issue. That being said, with the repeated caveat that I missed the very beginning, this runs the risk of transhumanism, that is, runs the risk of being just another cult and another utopianist project that either never gets off the ground fully in the way that it says that it's going to, or gets off the ground and becomes a failure. I, off the top of my head, would venture a guess that most utopian projects either never got off the ground or ended up failing. And I guess if there's one thing you left out, you didn't address my Teen Vogue article that I recently wrote about the furry issue and how furries relate to transhumanism.
Well, we did talk about Gooners. I say Gooners are the cousins. They're the cousins of the furries. You know?
I will say for a fact that neither of them have any representation in the U.S. Transhumanist Party.
No. See, my whole argument... forgive me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but my whole argument is that the furries are actually the vanguard. But that's maybe for another time, that discussion. No, but
well, I could... Yeah, go on.
No, in all seriousness, though, at some point I would like to talk about the cultish, because there are people out there who think of it as a cult, and I think we should get into that, but we can wait on that for the moment.
So I can tell you from an official standpoint, the notion of transhumanism as a cult based on my knowledge of the internal dynamics of the movement is absurd. There cannot be a cult leader or cult hierarchy arising within our movement based on the people who are in it and the structures that are within it.
I wish we were organized enough to have a cult. That would be aspirational goals, honestly.
Well, at the risk of sidelining any other topics, I would like you to elaborate on that. Very much so.
Go for it. This is what we're here for.
All right. Well, I will say this. A cult requires certain elements in order to exist. One is a very rigidly hierarchical organization where essentially everybody either implicitly or explicitly has to obey a singular leader or else. The transhumanist movement is extremely multipolar. There are particular organizations within it, some of which explicitly identify as transhumanists, like the US Transhumanist Party or Humanity Plus. Others do not. Each of these organizations have different leadership. The leadership will often disagree with one another or have different outlooks on strategy or tactics. And indeed, I would say there are as many disagreements among transhumanists as there are between transhumanists and the broader public. Sometimes we have to take stock of the fact that we do have a lot in common within the movement, and some of us try to create a more unified front, especially in matters where transhumanism has singular ways to distinguish itself. But there is definitely no possibility right now of anyone within the transhumanist movement implementing some sort of rigid conformity. The risk, I would say, is the opposite, that there can be a lot of entryism into our movement of people who claim to be transhumanist, but really have ulterior agendas, and they can get quite far in insinuating those ulterior agendas into the movement. The other aspect of a cult is a kind of insistence on exclusivity, insistence on people walling themselves off from the outside world and rejecting the possibility of association with people who don't think like them. So along these lines, think of, say, the Branch Davidians or the Church of Scientology as having these kinds of cult-like features. And if you disagree, if you have a different point of view, you're ostracized from the cult. You lose your connections, your social ties, your financial ties, and the cult tries to kind of structure your financial life around itself.
Wait, for the Branch Davidians? I mean, I have to look into them, but the vibe online recently about Dave Koresh and all that seems to be more along the lines of he literally did nothing wrong type of vibe. Now, I don't know if that's the case or not, but there does seem to be a lot of animus, I think, probably rightfully given towards the agents that did what they did that day. I don't want to get too much into that, but I just want to quickly...
It's a bit of a tangent. Of course, I don't support what the U.S. federal government did to that cult, but it was a cult. And I think, generally speaking, people have a right to make bad decisions with regard to their allegiances, and they shouldn't be punished politically or through the use of government force for doing so unless they're directly endangering the lives of others. But I don't think that negates the fact that that organization had a lot of cult-like elements. The idea of setting up one's own microcosm of human interaction, which does not admit communication with the broader society, I would say, is the mark of a cult. That's why I would not characterize established mainstream organized religions as cults. So the Catholic Church is not a cult. The Church of Latter-day Saints is not a cult, because they allow and indeed encourage their let's say believers to engage with the broader public, and they don't ostracize people for having interactions or having even ideas that they take in from the outside world and bring into their organization. Now, it's interesting that one of the criticisms that Ryan articulated in his argument of the anti-transhumanist position is this notion that transhumanism has aspects of a religion because of the desire to overcome human mortality, or the formation of communities which discuss certain ideas in a more structured or systematic manner. I don't think necessarily that's the characteristic of a religion. I think rather religions often utilize and co-opt certain ways of interaction and certain desires, the desire for answers about key questions of life, of what is in the universe, of how do certain phenomena work, what is the implication of death. So humans have had those kinds of curiosities for the entirety of human existence, and religions offered the answers in the views of their adherents and certain social structures that helped people navigate sometimes a very hostile or confusing existence. And many communities offer that as well, without being religions and without being cults. So that would be my answer. There could be said to be a transhumanist movement, a transhumanist community, but we're never going to tell somebody, don't interact with somebody who's critical of transhumanism. We're going to expel you. We're going to tell people not to have any dealings with you if you do that. No, go out into the world and freely discourse with anybody on any subject.
Well, Astral, is there anything that Gennady or Ryan have not considered as far as why you would say that transhumanism could be potentially a cult?
Sort of, but I don't want to give the impression I don't agree with the vast majority of what he said, because you are characterizing cults, especially the negative aspect and the negative perspective on cults, correctly. I do feel that you may have mischaracterized the religion thing a little bit, but to stick with cults for the moment, cults, the word cult has got this negative association with a couple of trends that took place in several very famous incidences, like the Jim Jones suicide cult, the Halley's Comet, I forgot the name of that one, the suicide cult, and then you have Heaven's Gate. And then you have L. Ron Hubbard's guys. I can't believe I'm blanking on their name.
Scientology.
Yes, and they're quite famous for not allowing people to associate. So while there is that element, if you look at the broad sweep of history, cults, especially in the West, let's stick with the West because I know that best. Cults arise.
Nice rhyme.
I didn't even realize I did that. Cults arise at different phases throughout civilizational development. And if you study those, which I've only done a little bit, you can see that they don't have all of the attributes that you outlined, specifically that they're not harshly insular, and they don't, they're not pejoratively forcing their members, not only because they don't just restrict their freedom of movement, but they also restrict them financially as well. And that wasn't necessarily an aspect of the cults of the past. The cults of the past were a little bit more open, and they looked a lot more like what we would call religion. So while I'm actually, you characterized the cults quite well. I was afraid you may have thought I was accusing transhumanism of being that type of cult, and I realized I didn't misspeak, but I should have elaborated a little bit more, because a cult can also be kind of a fringe or an outlier's perspective on a religious issue or even on a social issue, but typically it's religion, and they have kind of a heretical or they go their own way. So a loose example for that would be the Mormons, who are a Christian in a way, but it's heretical to believe that Joseph Smith, or whatever his name was is the reincarnation of Christ. So in that sense, they are a cult. And then there's the utopian thing as well. I don't want to get too far off in the weeds yet with the utopian thing, but I do want to ask you to at least answer yes or no if you consider transhumanism to be utopian, and if that gives you pause at all or causes concern for you at all.
Well, it's interesting because the term utopia literally means no place. And Thomas More, when he wrote his book Utopia, he intentionally sought to characterize a type of society that he didn't think could exist. But if you read some of the actual details of the society he portrayed, in many ways, we are ahead of that society already. So the way transhumanists would approach this question of, are you utopian? Generally, the answer would be no, because utopia is seen as a kind of static destination, a kind of impossible equilibrium of a human society where everything just works perfectly harmoniously and can go on that way forever. A better term would actually be extropia, from extropy. So extropy is a term coined by Max More, one of the leading philosophers in the transhumanist movement. And extropy is essentially the opposite of entropy. Entropy is the degeneration of complex forms of organization into simpler forms of organization. But the insight that Max More articulated is that intelligent life forms, such as humans, have the ability to bring forth greater complexity out of simplicity. So humans are agents of extropy in that way, and we can create ever-improving systems, not perfect systems. I don't think in 500 years or 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years, if the transhumanist trajectory is followed, we will ever have solved all of the problems of existence. We will come across ever increasing scales of problems that might start seeming more manageable on the margin, even if they are far from being manageable with our current capabilities. But we will never be able to say at any particular point, oh, we have now reached utopia. We have now reached the perfect society where everything can stay constant forever and there will be no problems at all.
Is that your cat, by the way, that I'm hearing in the background?
That is Beatrice, yes.
Oh, I would love to see Beatrice. If there was any way that you could bring Beatrice on the screen, that would be a definite treat for everybody, Gennady. So, I don't know, I'm not pushing you into, but in case it does happen, we would definitely welcome it.
She is not allowed in my office. She would sniff amongst the computer wires. It would not be a beneficial experience for her.
Well, Davey, just in case if you ever want to bring her on real quick to show her off and then bring her back out, I'm keeping an open door for that to happen, just so you know. But anyway, Astral Flight, what do you think of what Gennady had to say? And I also want to bring it to back to Weird Hiker as well, and then to Remus, and of course to Ryan as well. So Astral, go for it. Like, I really want to try to probe here, because you guys seem to agree on quite a lot. What is the problem? Is there even a problem? Are we all transhumanists now? What's going on?
Yeah, no, that was a great way to segue into the core of my incredulity about transhumanism, which you bring up extropy, and extropia, which I've never heard the term extropia. Transhumanism, perhaps, maybe that's the first movement ever characterized by an extropia. And this is also where I get a little bit nervous that I'm missing something about the technology, but I'm just going to tell you what my perspective is in the context of your response, which is that the way I was introduced to transhumanism was Greg Kurzweil's pretty simplistic model of exponentially progressing technology. And, it's probably famous and legendary at this point that he had this little chart or graph or whatever that technological progress has has exponentially grown over this many years. So if we extrapolate further over the next, say, 50 years or whatever, we will be at a point where we can have AI or transhumanism or whatever. And when you bring up an extropia versus, I guess, would be an entropia, it immediately makes me think that it's flawed for the same reason that Kurzweil's model is flawed, is that there's no reason for us to believe that technological progress will continue along the same trajectory that it has been on. In fact, I think there's some evidence to show that it's already stuttering out a little bit. But in a broader, more general sense as well, the concept of extropia or extropy versus entropy makes me want to ask a very simple question that I could elaborate on quite a lot. But the very simple question is, do you think it's possible to stave off entropy forever, or do you think entropy is inevitable? And when I heard you talking about this, I felt like I was listening to the equivalence of like a philosopher, or even say a rationalist or an atheist arguing that reason is the way to overcome irrationality, and reason is the way to overcome human error. And Socrates saying that the way to happiness is through virtue, which you do through dialectics, which is of course exponential reason. So do you see the connection that I'm making? Do you think that entropy is inevitable? And how long, I mean, what is your projection for how long this technological progress can go on?
Yes, well, these are, I think, excellent questions. They're foundational questions when it comes to addressing key areas of disagreement between transhumanists and their critics. First of all, I would say I do believe in the primacy of reason, and reason as being the toolkit that enables us ultimately to solve the problems facing humankind, although not solve them all at once, but through an incremental process leveraging our current capabilities. Our technology is the product of our reason, but also our decisions are the product of our rational faculty, if the rational faculty is deployed appropriately with an understanding of the context in which it operates and the facts that it ultimately uses as the inputs. So rational faculty has to be combined with empirical evidence and the material resources to carry out a particular transformation of the world. So yes, this is a fundamentally pro-reason position. I do believe that in the long run, extropy can win out over entropy, because the rational faculty can continually expand our available means of combating disorder, chaos, ruin, and other kinds of deleterious processes. It's often difficult from the standpoint of a given level of technological advancement to truly anticipate what the future is going to be like. And you mentioned Ray Kurzweil and his projection of a technological singularity, which really would be driven by a convergence of several areas of emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, automation, biotechnology, nanotechnology, medicine. All of these will interact with one another to produce breakthroughs that would not have happened in isolation, and second, third, 10th order effects that from our current vantage point would be extremely difficult to foresee. But I have said before that humankind has actually experienced at least 3 technological singularities already. One was the agricultural revolution. The next one was the Industrial Revolution. And the subsequent one, which many of us actually lived through partially, was the Information Revolution. And from a person prior to any of those technological revolutions, it would have been extremely difficult to anticipate the possibilities existing subsequently, especially after 2 or more such revolutions. So think about a peasant in the agricultural age. It would be difficult for that peasant to even conceive of an assembly line or powered flight, for instance. A genius of the agricultural age, like Leonardo da Vinci, could have conceived of powered flight. In fact, he did. But could he have conceived of Twitter? I don't think the thought would have ever crossed his mind. So, Lev, I keep seeing in the chat comments that the stream is muted.
Oh, sorry about that. That was my mic. I am so sorry about that, everybody. Yes, this is my fault because I was typing on the keyboard. I am going to repeat exactly what I said.
This guy.
This guy. I know. What the hell is going on with me? Anyway, here we go. I am back. Everybody is going to hear exactly what I have to say. What I was saying earlier is that we had a stream on before about governance. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it already. And it reminded me a little bit of Robert McNamara during the Vietnam War, who was a big statistician, who was always talking about stats and may have been responsible for a lot of the carnage in the Vietnam War because it was all based on stats. You know, how many people you get to, how many people are killed in this area means that we're winning the war and whatever. So my concern here is that the statisticians are going to win out the battle for hearts and minds within various transhumanist communities where certain problems that Gennady and Ryan may have been talking about here in relation to the human mind, in relation to the human willpower, that's going to go away. That is not going to be considered, and instead we're slowly going to be occupied by, I would say, what would be considered to be the midwit, somebody who thinks that they're smart but are not. Somebody who thinks that they're wise, but are not wise. They're going to be the ones that are going to be dictating a technology that's going to lessen the willpower of the individual when it comes to what they are able to do in life. And they're going to end up being babysat by the Neuralink or by whatever technology that's going to give them a certain guidance as far as how to act. They don't develop themselves. They don't develop their willpower. They don't develop their family. And what do we have left then? We have just a bunch of lemmings that are going to be following the dictates of the AI. And I don't see that as being a positive direction if what we have over here is a human test. If everything that we're experiencing right now, if kind of like the idea of the Hindu idea of the Loka, where all of your experiences throughout this entire life, it's all basically for you to have a certain problem to solve, to have a certain thing to overcome based on the actions that you took in your past lives or the actions that you took yesterday. You know, that everything is pretty much that. It's pretty much you answering for the fruits of your actions before. And if we have these things that end up being on top of us, what do we do then? What do we do if these things are going to dictate how we act? So that's my big concern, as well as the midwits taking over. That's my second concern. So I don't know, Astral or Weird Hiker or Remus, if you want to add anything to that before Ryan or Gennady would respond.
I don't know. I would say that we're kind of the situation that you're talking about, where people are already kind of just losing it. It's kind of already happening, from my point of view. Maybe I'm just projecting because I am like pretty much like dysfunctional around technology. I'll just scroll Twitter all day if I don't go outside and get absolutely nothing done. But I imagine a lot of people are in that camp, and it's, yeah, I don't know. I have bleak outlooks about people solving things.
And how about yourself, Remus?
Well, to me, it's a similar idea. It's like I just don't see how. Like, I understand that it's not a immediate jump to, like, God people, but I just don't understand why that wouldn't like, you would have to resolve human nature, or like, human propensity for like deception and, like, power plays and all of that shit, in order to have a society where people can have this much power. Like, I definitely don't think that the whole, like, wirehead, ultimate Coomer Gooner, isekai fucking, full Sword Art Online goon cave. I don't think that's good. Like, I don't think people should be doing that, obviously. But at the same time, like, I don't think it's wrong that we progress technologically. I don't think that it's wrong that we try to solve suffering or hardship through the use of technology, because that is just as human as anything else. Like, that's what we do, is try to figure out ways to make our lives better and easier, right? So, the struggle is very important, as we all understand.
The struggle is real.
Yeah, the struggle is real, and the struggle shapes you. And I think trying to eliminate the struggle or run away from it is not necessarily the best thing, or like artificially construct some sort of womb around yourself that hermetically seals you from it. Like that I don't think that's the path. I think there's a way to do transhumanism right. I'm a Warhammer 40,000 fan.
That's
truly,
right.
Yeah, it is truly transhuman in many ways. But, like, to me, that's a good use of Here, I'm going to make a thing that has a direct and specific purpose. It does a task. It is a biological creature. It's alive. It's made out of a human being, but it's not a person. It knows it's not a person. It doesn't think it's a person. It doesn't try to be a person. It knows its job, and it tries to do that. It can go catastrophically wrong, but I still think that that's a better way of doing it than trying to, like, I don't know, I feel like just willy-nilly whole hog giving people the ability to do crazy fucking sci-fi shit is just, like, not a good idea. I don't know. That's my position.
Well, Ryan, how would the transhumanists address some of these things that Remus was talking about, as well as this concern that I brought up as far as these statistician midwits coming to being in charge and kind of getting everybody to be on the same page about the way things are going without actually addressing a lot of these concerns?
Yeah, I think some of the points that Remus brought up there were things that I had mentioned in my attack on transhumanism. The idea that, do we trust these people who are making these decisions to make the right decisions? Who is to say what humanity should become, and how do we know they're going to get that right?
I found myself agreeing with you a lot. I was sitting there being like, yes, these are the right things to say, and I was glad to hear they were coming from you.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I mean, it is a legitimate concern. Like, I think that everything that I brought up in my attack on transhumanism is really me shining light on a problem that I think transhumanists need to discuss more and overcome. And Gennady was right when he was talking about that these are conversations that happen in transhumanist circles all the time. I would say majority of the conversation in transhumanist circles is talking about more about what could go wrong than what could go right. So hopefully that should let some people who are outside those circles sleep a little easier knowing that that is the case. But at the same time, I think I didn't bring it up, but one attack on transhumanism that I could have brought up as my own point would be that it's a eugenics movement. And I think that attack on it is flawed because it comes from an inherently authoritarian perspective. And I think transhumanism broadly, although Gennady, as you mentioned, it's a large tent type situation, there are a lot of diverse opinions. But in general, transhumanists believe that it's up to the individual to design the future that they want for themselves. And in that way, it inherently cannot be a eugenics movement. So while there are perhaps justifiable fears of what future will transhumanists create for society and for everyone, perhaps the more appropriate question that transhumanists would ask is, what future are you going to create for yourself, regardless of what other people do for themselves? I think that would be the one to answer there.
But see, that's a dangerous situation, perhaps just as dangerous as, eugenics, because that would be, in a way, self-imposed, kind of like unwanted, but turns out to be that way, dysgenics, if we're talking about the willpower of a person being given over to an outside source that would guide their decision-making process.
I don't think it's self-imposed dysgenics, because I don't think those enhancements or genetic edits or alterations of any other aspects of human biology or capability would be used to undermine willpower. Indeed, I think the role of willpower now is more important than ever, in that there's a proliferation of choice. We have more choices right now about how to spend our time in what environments, using what tools, pursuing what aesthetics, what life decisions than we've ever had before. So there is a role, I think, for a kind of fixed core of individuality that responds to all of these possibilities in a rigorous and consistent way, using rationality. And you're correct, by the way, in some of your critiques of major social media platforms like Twitter. These are critiques that I share and I have articulated myself in the past. Not all of those platforms are designed with the kinds of incentives that we would consider most conducive to human flourishing. Any platform that is designed primarily for the purpose of maximizing clicks or maximizing the user's time or amplifying the most extreme and divisive sentiments is not the most beneficial to human beings. But I don't see a way out except through the use of rationality, through the centrality of the individual and individual choice and individual innovation in designing different environments, designing different structures in order to perhaps counter some of those incentives. But I would say we are living through a very messy transitional period right now, where some of these technologies are still quite new to people, and people reflexively apply the norms of an older period of time and some of the suboptimalities, cognitive biases, flawed emotional predilections of the human psyche in order to respond to those environments. But Ryan was alluding to this even in the critique of transhumanism that he articulated. Essentially, we live in a world right now that is mismatched to our evolved cognitive capabilities. But why are we to accept that our evolved cognitive capabilities, with all of their limitations, are in some manner the end stage of all development? Can we not alter certain aspects of our approach toward the world in order to more effectively tackle these challenges? What if we had mental capabilities that were able to perceive all of the pernicious group dynamics on Twitter, all of the cognitive biases?
But Gennady, who is the us? Who is the us there? That's my biggest concern, because I agree with you. I mean, look, you know me, that I consider myself to be classic liberal, somewhat libertarian oriented, but this is exactly why I want to be hard on that part of myself and look in the other direction, where, you know, there's a quote about how a nation is judged by how it treats those who are the least well off. In a nation of a certain amount of individuals, free thinkers, rationalists, whatever you want to call them, there's always going to be more people that are going to go for, you know, for a bigger tent approach, people who are going to go for the lowest common denominator. And the question is, how can we lift those people up to be able to get the most out of life? My concern when I'm talking about self-imposed dysgenics is if we are talking about whether it's microchips implanted in the brain, like Neuralink, if we're talking about anything that would basically make life easier for a person, kind of like taking a pill that people are already taking. I mean, we're already seeing this today with how much people depend on medication. My concern here is that with all of this externality that's added on top of the human experience, people are not going to exercise their willpower. And for me, it's a question of who exactly the we are here. Because if you define us as in me plus this thing that's on top of me that's guiding my movements, I would say no. I'd say that that is a miscalculation on the part of how we define our identity. I think that the self, in the Jungian sense, would be truer to who we are. This thing that would say be behind the ego. The ego is the experiencer, but the self is something that I think is even deeper, something that connects all of us to a primordial whole, in my opinion. But the point that I'm getting to, without getting too metaphysical about this, is that at the very least, I think that a case should be made for a person exercising their own willpower upon their experience, as opposed to being puppeted around by external influences, like people are already being puppeted around with antidepressants and other drugs that they are currently taking. Not to say what was brought up before by Jasper in the chat, if you go on YouTube and search for a woman cries as she hears for the first time, I doubt you could call that satanic, absolutely. But here we're talking about somebody whose functions were already impaired, and they had something to help them out. I'm talking about a person whose functions are not impaired, who could have, walked around, but instead of walking, they decided to sit on the rascal. There are people who end up making those decisions in life. You know what I mean? And that is one example for those who don't know rascals, like that scooter, that the heavier people sit in to get around. So that's just like another example. You could say that the rascal that's ridden by Spurto, patriotic Spurto bear, American bear, that is an example of transhumanism in a certain way. We didn't have the rascals before, and now we do. So I don't know. I want to bring it to Weird Hiker as well, because you didn't have a chance to speak, and I know that you can't stay for long. So let me know, what do you think about the points that I was bringing up, and then go back to Gennady and Ryan.
Actually, I have a question I want to piggyback off what you just said, but let's let Weird Hiker go first. But I want to. That was an excellent point. I want to piggyback off it, but please.
Yeah, I can stretch it out a little bit. About the very maximum limit is probably about an hour from now, because I've just got a couple errands I need to run before things close. But anyways. I actually had a question for Ryan about how he would have responded to his own question during the debate, but we're kind of on this train that's it's about the emphasis on the good of autonomy, I guess. I'm kind of twisting his words, but we can go with what the question Astral had, because I would imagine it's on this same line, and we can come back. I'm just curious.
Sure. Yeah, let's go to Astral, then back to Hiker.
Yeah. I'm super stoked to be on the panel with Weird Hiker. He's been my boy for a while on Twitter, so
Thanks,
I hate that I jumped in front of you, but Lev brought up an excellent point that made me think of a question I want to respond to either Ryan or Jen. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but Gennady, unless someone wants to correct me, that's how I'm going to say it.
Gennady.
Gennady, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Gennady, your spiel there actually sounded quite pro-eugenic, which is not necessarily an insult coming from me. I'm not necessarily immediately going to be opposed to that, but I was under the impression you were trying to say it wasn't eugenic. In fact, I hadn't thought of transhumanism as a eugenic movement until you began speaking, and now I certainly see why people might think that it is. But based on what Lev was saying, the thing I was thinking is this: what is the incentive of the people who make the technology to enhance human capabilities? What is the incentive to turn them into more able and more capable rational agents to operate in the new world that is the new transhumanist world that is being dictated, or if not being dictated, at least being sublimated by technology, so that the things that keep us bound in human toil are finally relieved by technology? What incentivizes whoever? Well, yeah, I guess ideally the technology would be propagating itself at some point. So at what point are they incentivized to enhance human capabilities? The only thing I can come up with immediately, this is a question I just came up with, so I have never thought about this before, but the only thing I can come up with off the top of my head is perhaps the profit margin, but I don't know why the AI would be concerned with the profit margin unless it was programmed to try to accumulate capital. But then you have to ask the question, well, why would you program it to do that? And it brings up a lot of problems. The other thing is, I want to sneak a second question in here, if I may be so bold. I've been familiar with this approach to technology for a while, and it's come often from leftism. There's a book that came out recently by Verso Press, which is a pretty openly socialistic, if not outright communist press out of the UK, called Luxury Space Communism. And then there's an older book that I'm looking at right now on my shelf.
Shout out to BJ Murphy, by the way.
Is that the author?
No, but that is Gennady. You know BJ, he's all about automated luxury space communism.
Right.
Yes, I know him well.
So I was just listening to a lecture of his, and then the counterpoint to that is the anarchist book that I'm looking at right now by Murray Bookchin. I can't think of the name of it. Post-scarcity anarchism. Both of these perspectives argue that humans will be more free because of technology, and it's from a leftist perspective. So my question is, not only what is the incentive for the technology to be eugenic for the human race as a whole, as opposed to dysgenic, like the excellent example of the Rascal Scooter. And secondly, I'm fully aware of the leftist perspective on advocating for this. Is there a conservative or right-wing perspective in favor of transhumanism?
Well, I would say transhumanism is transpartisan. It transcends the distinctions between left and right, which are really obsolete now, even given current technological realities. A lot of the discussions about whether a particular approach is capitalist or socialist really fail to reflect the blurring of those lines that has happened already over the past several decades. And furthermore, I would say the term eugenics is a term that originated in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, when the concept of genetic modification of individuals was not really present. So eugenicists of that era talked about improving the human species and having a greater preponderance of what they considered desirable traits and a lower preponderance of what they considered undesirable traits. The problem with that view is that it was inherently collectivistic. It was a species-focused view rather than an individual-focused view, and the eugenicists were willing, metaphorically, to break a few eggs in order to make their omelet of a superior human species. And this is where transhumanism is profoundly different, in that the individual is the locus of choice and of decision making. We don't seek to control humanity. We don't seek to subjugate people or consign them to certain fates for the purpose of service to a higher cause. Quite the opposite. We seek to give them a broader variety of choices and tools which they could use to improve themselves. And you asked what could be the conceivable incentives for those involved in the transhumanist movement to do that. I would say the incentive is rational self-interest. And I will tell you what my incentive is. I do want to make sure I say this because I actually have about 10 minutes remaining myself. But my incentive is to avoid the destruction of the self. And I see during the current era a possibility of indefinite longevity being attained with sufficient technological progress, but it's not a guarantee. It depends on how quickly these technologies are developed, whether they come in time for me to avert my biological senescence or to prevent me from dying in other ways. There are problems facing an individual that money or power per se cannot solve, but human ingenuity, human innovation can. So my rational incentive is to maximize the amount of innovation in existence. If transhumanists were to enslave the entirety of humankind to their cause, the goal of maximizing innovation would not be fulfilled, because slaves, they could do brute manual labor, but they're not very good at creativity. You can't really create under that kind of compulsion. You yourself have to have an incentive to create, to do something that you think will benefit you. But in order to benefit you, you have to make something, bring something forth that will benefit other people. So ultimately, my view is, when people follow their long-term, enlightened, rational self-interests, there is a harmony of interests. People will tend to act in ways that benefit others and that ultimately will benefit themselves in a manner that an adversarial or zero-sum dynamic will not be able to accomplish. So that's the kind of world that I seek to achieve, and that many other transhumanists seek to achieve. We actually want to empower individuals, liberate them, give them access to these technologies to see what they can create, because these may be possibilities that we ourselves as individuals could not create, but we would benefit if other people were able to.
Excellent. And I want to make sure that Weird Hiker is also able to talk before you have to go, Gennady, and I really appreciate you being here, brother. So, Weird Hiker, go for it.
Yeah, so when we were talking about the issue of the point that Ryan brought up, where, you know, if I was saying that, like, you know, we're going to offer these technologies to people that, for example like CRISPR babies or whatever, and he made this point, which is the point that I would have made in his shoes too. It was a great point, although it's got its own flaws. But that you know, it's basically either adopt this technology that everybody else is using so that you can remain competitive, or lag behind and become further alienated and become poor, become ridiculed, etc. And I was just wondering how he would have answered that point that he raised, because I don't know, his point about I don't know if I'm misconstruing what you said, but the good and being able to make your own choices as an individual and a rational actor and all that, like, it's this problem that always, you know, brings up that whole thing of, well, everybody's making this choice, I'm going to fall behind if I don't do it. It sucks, but everybody has to make it. Well, maybe it sucks, maybe it doesn't, but everybody has to do it to remain competitive with each other. And hopefully that made sense, but I just wanted to know how you would have answered that question.
Yeah, I think one of the things I was getting at with that point that I was making, attacking transhumanism, can be extended beyond that to bring up the idea that transhumanism could exacerbate the existing inequalities we're facing today and could cement them in theory so that they are insurmountable. If you're at the lower end of the economic level, or you can't get access to technology today, and those who do are now all of a sudden augmenting their genes as well, how will you ever catch up? Or at least that's the criticism there. I think my argument against that would be that look at how technology is dispersing already. More people have access to cell phones than have access to toilets. And this is something that is, spreading quicker than these basic necessities that I think we would need as well. And also, as Gennady was saying, from rational self-interest, right? I don't want to be the only super intelligent, superhuman living forever person. I want my friends and family to live together as well, mainly because I like having them around. And I want the stranger I've never met in Indonesia to have those benefits as well, so that I'm not the only one creating technologies that could benefit me. That super intelligent, super enhanced person could be doing that as well. My doctor could be super intelligent and super enhanced. It doesn't benefit me at all to have the humans I'm surrounded by to not have those benefits. I benefit when they are excelling in their lives and innovating and happy. That benefits me as well. So from a purely, even taking my empathy and sympathy and wanting them to have a good life out, from just my personal self-interest, I want them to be well off and happy and fulfilled. And that I think benefits everyone. So I think that ultimately would take care of those problems itself. And I was talking to someone the other day in a transhumanist forum, actually, and they argued with me that there's no sign that super intelligent humans, whether we're augmented with AI or perhaps even an AGI itself, would be any more moral or ethical or caring. And I think to put that under more objective terms, I phrased it as would be less likely to knowingly inflict suffering on conscious creatures. They were arguing that there's no indication that an AI or super intelligent human would be less likely to do that than we are now. And I think that's wrong, first of all. I think there is objectively less humans inflicting suffering on others than there were just centuries ago, or especially when you look back before that. I think this technological advancement comes alongside more development of an awareness and an understanding and an acceptance of others and wanting others to succeed. When we're no longer fighting over resources and mates and food and shelter to survive as we have ancestrally and is still in our limbic systems, as I mentioned in my conversation, when we're no longer having to deal with those things, we can be more accepting of others and really work together more. So that might sound utopian and pie in the sky thinking there, but I think we've seen trends leading to that point, and I hope that continues.
Would you say anything, Ryan, to my earlier comment regarding people creating these self-imposed dysgenics through the process of having these external things act out life for them as opposed to themselves acting out life? Because you're right, we may not necessarily need to drop a rock on somebody's head, but at a certain point when life just kind of like goes by us and we're not really engaged actively in utilizing our willpower. And again, there's probably going to be individuals out there who will definitely do that, who are smart enough to realize that if you don't work on yourself, you're going to deteriorate over time. But like I said before, a nation is supposed to take care of those who are the most vulnerable, and I think those who are the most intellectually vulnerable will be the ones who wouldn't be able to figure that out and who would be stuck in this new paradigm of wanting to either constantly get pleasure, constantly get gooned out, or be instructed by Mr. Robot on how to act. And that would be, I think, a great deterrent for the future of human civilization.
I'm going to take an interesting perspective here. And without wearing a mask or playing devil's advocate or anything, I'm actually going to raise a criticism of transhumanism that I think about a lot. And that is, I don't believe in free will. I think that we are the result of, as I mentioned in my conversation there, we are a result of our microbiome and neurochemicals and lived experiences and genes, none of which we had a role in creating. And I am worried in some sense that giving humans the technology to be superhuman and super creative and super powerful might not be giving those technologies and capabilities to the self that we think exists and that Gennady seems like he thinks exists based on his previous answer. But are we just handing those keys to super advanced capabilities to our neurochemicals that we have no control over? That's a concern that I have of who's in the driver's seat there, and is the us that we think it is really something that exists in reality?
Ryan, I think before I go, this would be a fascinating conversation for us to continue, maybe at a future U.S. Transhumanist Party virtual enlightenment salon, because there is plenty to discuss there on the subject of free will. And for the record, I do consider free will to exist, just as I consider a unitary self to exist as the locus of identity. But there is a lot of discussion of that within the transhumanist movement. So those who are interested, by the way, should visit my YouTube channel. It is G. Stolyarov II, for G. Stolyarov II, where the U.S. Transhumanist Party holds its weekly virtual enlightenment salons, generally every Sunday at 1 p.m. U.S. Pacific time. And we also can discuss these kinds of subjects for hours at a time, typically with a guest. So hopefully we will have Ryan on as a guest sometime in the future. Unfortunately, I have to depart right now, but it was quite a fascinating conversation, certainly a one-of-a-kind debate that I appreciated being able to observe.
Guys, please follow Gennady Stolyarov on Twitter. Follow him on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to his channel, Gennady. It is always a great pleasure to have you here, my friend. I would love to have you back. And yes, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Lev, and good night to all.
Thank you.
Good night. So before we depart, I do want to kind of get into this, and I know like I have my own way of looking at these things from my own perspective. Is look, I could change my mind as well. I am curious though, Ryan, when it comes to consciousness, you're more of a chemical-oriented person. I'm curious, like when it comes to something like, and again, my very let's say layman view of quantum mechanics, but just this idea of the observer affecting reality and us being experiencers of this reality, how would you be able to quantify one's experience as something chemical as opposed to something more like beyond chemical, more in the realm of ideas, more in the realm of, you know, there is something actually special to being able to observe life going on around you as opposed to it just being chemical reaction? Like, how would you be able to quantify that as just being chemical and nothing more?
So I like you, I am hesitant to get into the world of quantum mechanics and quantum physics and all of that because I really cannot wrap my head around a lot of it. That said, I tend to have a belief that there is a objective physical reality that exists. I think that this table in front of me...
Can you define physical?
No, that's pretty hard.
Because when you get right down to it, there is no physical. If we're talking about, again, I don't want to get into... All I could say about quantum mechanics is that you can't actually place a certain, let's say, area where a particular thing is located, and that thing doesn't really have any physicality other than energy. So already that's not that...
That's not
okay,
what it is.
Astral. Okay, Astral, go for it.
Well, I'm not a quantum mechanic.
Well, you just said that's not what it is, but
that's
go on.
That's from my understanding, that's a misrepresentation of it. It's that the probability of where the atom will be or the electron will be when you're going to observe it is not accurate. So you can't accurately predict its position in space through statistical means with any reliable accuracy. And the way I understand the layman's interpretation in the popular imagination is that it's a misunderstanding, that they then say what you just said, which I don't know if you're playing devil's advocate or not, but they say that quantum mechanic means, position is relative and that nothing is static, everything is in flux. Well, everything is in flux, but not in the way that they're explaining it through their debased interpretation of quantum mechanics. So I don't actually think the physical world is in any sort of question whatsoever. I think it's like it's a way to go off in the weeds. It's a way to be misled. But I can't help but think you're being a little bit provocative by asking what is physical. I think
I don't think so, personally.
No?
No. I don't know. I think that I don't know, we put too much stock in objectivity and reality and physical things, and like it just I don't know. I'm not going to articulate this well, but it just seems like you shortchange yourself. It's better to have a suspension of disbelief. I think that you can become disenchanted about just life in general very quickly if you insist on believing in this provable shared reality. I think that there's a power in inventing your own world. Transhumanism without the screen in front of your face is what I believe in.
I think that kind of gets to what I was going to say there, which is interesting because I feel like that was something that was brought up in the debate as well, as a position that it actually seems to be articulated authentically there rather than play in a devil's advocate position. But yeah, I agree that with Astral's representation of quantum mechanics, that's my understanding as well. So I don't think that necessarily my failure to have an adequate dictionary definition of physical reality is any indication of its lack of existence. And to kind of agree with what Weird Hiker was saying there, I believe that was Weird Hiker that was just talking.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything necessarily about a shared reality that we have to agree on. I think that a physical reality exists regardless of our ability to recognize or understand it. And that's kind of what I was saying to Lev's original question there is, yeah, we could be completely oblivious to what is actually happening in the world. But if what's actually happening in the physical reality isn't part of our lived experiences through our neurochemicals, through our senses, what presence does it have? What meaning does it have to us? So in some ways,
that's my point, basically.
Weird Hiker, that that we do not only can we do create our own individual realities that are not shared all the time.
Well, just to be clear, I was in no way saying that physical reality does not exist. The reason why I brought up that question of how would you define the physical is I think that people may put some limitations on what is possible in physical reality. And you're right, it may not be that the observer would necessarily affect what is observed, but the question is, what exactly does affect it? What exactly does affect something being in one position as opposed to the other? I mean, that goes back to that whole spooky action at a distance thing, which again, I have to look at a little bit deeper. But these things, I'll give you an analogy. To me, these things are a lot like when I talk about religion, when I talk about, let's say, what people decide on as, quantifying the state of the universe, a lot of it I see as being cargo cults within cargo cults. If there is an island out there that decide that this island is the universe and everything around it is just like the vast unknown, and then all of a sudden somebody takes over, I don't know, someplace in Sumeria and declares themselves to be king of the universe, even though they never stepped foot in China, for example. And then you get somebody who, let's say, knows everything about, the planet Earth and all the places around there, and that's where they put their limits on, and then all of a sudden they go to space, and then so on and so forth. So there is a process of discovery here. I would not put limits on where exactly, what exactly we are capable of achieving within this reality. And my only concern is that when people talk about chemical and physical, is that they do put a certain limitation based on the cargo cult of what is only known at this time. And my only, let's say, nudge would be to let's start exploring certain things that may be beyond the realm of whatever it is we're used to considering to be the real. And I don't know, like Remus, we've talked a lot about Jinn, things like that, and it could go off into more of a fantasy type territory, but can we make a bit of a bridge over here as far as certain
I want to
things
get off
that are...
into that fantasy territory.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, go for it.
Yeah, I think so. I think the idea that I think there's a base reality to a degree, but I don't think it's what you think it is. Like I think like it's almost like we're seeing layers, right? You can only see a bit of it. And to me it's kind of like, I don't know, if you've ever lucid dreamt and you've ever felt your dream construct itself in real time and like watched it. It's a very strange experience to watch a limitless space become a place and then have that empty place become a cohesive space that you exist in, and then it starts having physical properties, and then you start experiencing things like heat, like even weather, wind, all of that, right? It's hard to, once you've done that, especially, it's hard to say that what you're doing when you're awake is like a different thing, you know what I mean, in a way. But I don't know. There has to be a base level, in my opinion. Maybe that's just conventional thinking, and I don't know. I'm trying to logic my way through something that's illogical, but at the same time, to me, it feels like intuitively there would be a bottom, just as much as there would be a top, right? So, I feel like there has to be a spot where we can all meet. You know what I mean? And yeah, you can go off and do your thing, but there is a spot where everybody comes back to, and everybody's sort of like everybody's touching the water in a weird way. Let's call it.
Silence.
You're talking about shared reality.
Yeah, I'm talking about the concepts of both shared and non-shared. Like it's possible that people have their own individual kind of like, I don't know, like a field almost, like, right? It's almost like you're experiencing reality as an orbit, right? And everybody sort of touches in their own way, like that orbit can merge and touch, and that's family life and acquaintances and all of that stuff. But anybody who spent a lot of time in solitude understands that you kind of like, you're in a different place, and when somebody invades it, it feels so like the whole vibe changes, right? If you Weird Hiker will understand this, but if you're walking alone for a really long time, and then all of a sudden there's a person there, the whole way everything feels shifts completely, right? To me, that's maybe there is something to the idea that we're having a sort of individual experience that gets shared by proximity, or like that, like maybe there's like a weird new sphere or something like that. It's an interesting idea.
Well, to
I think
me,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
What you're saying, I think, goes perfectly with what Ryan was saying about free will and the lack thereof. I'm not ready to totally declare one side or the other, but I'm pretty strongly on Ryan's side that there is no free will. I do believe with some struggle we can probably assert our will to an extent, but for the most part, I don't think it's an active player in human interrelationships and human affairs. I believe we are much more at the mercy of our more base needs, neurochemistry, and hormonal release. And these things are heavily influenced by our environment. And I think that what you're saying ties in nicely to that in a certain way, in the sense that if you are like one with your environment and you're being moved around by your environment. A very, very simple way to characterize what I mean is just going from hot to cold or cold to hot, depending on which is more comfortable for you. And then a person comes in and they exert some sort of influence on that. And the way it flows into the discussion of transhumanism, not to get too far afield here, because I want both of you guys to respond, is that I think the struggle of life is the only way we can in any way assert our will over ourselves, our environment, or each other. And I do believe humanity, I think it's probably just a fact that humanity was in some sort of harmony with their environment, almost, if not complete harmony. And the more we fall into civilization, then harmony becomes disharmonious. But my point is that if transhumanism achieves its needs, I actually see it as negating the will by negating the struggle with the environment. If it does come to full fruition, hopefully that made sense. And I'd like to hear I would love to hear Ryan elaborate on the lack of free will, because I'm with him on that. Anyway, go on, Lev. Looks like you have something to say.
I am curious what Ryan would elaborate on as far as free will goes. I personally don't really know where I stand. It's not really a question that I can answer as far as, do we have free will, don't we? I don't know. I mean, I'm just going to assume that I'm going to do the best I can to exert my willpower. What I would also add to that is, I think that when people just quote-unquote live in harmony, then we devolve into animals. Meaning that if we're just living for the sake of surviving and not really struggling against that, not really having our ego go through a struggle session, which I think the modern condition has especially prolonged.
That's just in civilization, though, because
that's what I mean. I think civilization is special.
Yeah,
I think civilization is special.
I agree with you.
Because look at all the other animals. Okay, I'm not gonna go too deep. I'm not gonna go deep in the waters here. All I'm gonna say is that all the other animals, they don't need to build shelter, and humans have always needed to build shelter around them. And I think that speaks to human beings being a very special creature here when it comes to how they go about life, how they go about struggling against the elements, as opposed to having certain appendages, certain things to help them survive in the kind of state where all they have to think about is mating and eating and sleeping, and that's it. So we're a little bit above just mating and eating and sleeping. We're thinking about these other things. I think this is a struggle session that is identified, I think, in even the name of Israel. What does the word Israel means? That was the name that was given to Jacob when he was fighting against wrestling the angel, wrestling against God. You know, we are fighting against this entire experience of life, and I think this fight is something that helps us grow. Just like when you work out, your muscles start developing. I think same thing here. It's not nature itself that I think pushes us into having to conform with whatever environment we happen to be in. That's definitely a part of it, but it's not the only part of it, I think. I think that there is a special consideration to be given to human will, whether ultimately that will is a part of some predestination, I don't know. But you know what is predestined? The fact that we have the great Giovanni Panicietti finally back on Break the Rules. Woo! Gio, I love you, man. Hold on. Yes, he is back. I mean, we don't have the screen right now. We're going to have the Geo screen just in a second. Here he is,
connecting.
The man of the hour, Giovanni Panicietti. Woo! Everybody subscribe.
Sorry.
Subscribe.
I don't have my camera on. I just came out of the shower.
I love you, Gio.
Nice and clean.
Gio is back in the house.
Well, you were talking about phenomenology, which I think nobody talks about. But
yes, go for it. Talk about phenomenology.
Circles. No, you finished your point, Lev. I'm just trying to.
No, that was my entire point. You know what I always talk about with this stuff, so I'm done. I'm done. Gio, it's your time to shine, baby. Oh, and by the way, the poll here. Let me tell you who won. For a long time, it was actually a 50-50, but I gotta say, Ryan, I love you, man, but Weird Hiker, 61.1%.
I knew that was happening.
Oh, no.
Ryan 38.9%.
Transhumanism
With
wins.
sincerity.
Yeah, but for a very long time, Ryan, you were
always rigged.
You were equal. You were like 50-50. So
I voted for you, by the way, Ryan.
Oh,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Gio, we were talking about free will before, and
sorry,
yeah,
I'm just reeling like from a million people calling me a simp on Twitter. That's
oh god,
for telling the truth. Anyways, we were talking about well, what are we talking about, Lev? I kind of
so
missed
we were
the debate.
okay. No problem at all.
Did the debate
So
devolve into like Sonny versus Gennady?
No,
Lev?
no. Everything was fine.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all chill.
I'm a lot more civil than that, Gio. I'll have you know.
That's true.
So basically we were talking about consciousness and the nature of consciousness.
Oh,
and then we were
Free
talking
will.
about free will. And the other point that I was making earlier is I think that we are still in the process of discovery of peeling off various layers of this onion of existence. What exactly are we? What are we doing here? I think this is a gradual process of finding out. And my concern
that's very Heideggerian of you, Lev.
Sure. And my concern is that when you say like, this is all physical, this is all chemical, and sure, it is physical, but my concern, what I voiced to Ryan before, is that we may be putting a certain limit on what exactly is possible with our own faculties. And that's the other thing, kind of goes back to my concern about transhumanism, is that it would create a somewhat closed system for people, let's say with artificial intelligence, where if they're not utilizing their own willpower for whether we have free will or not, if they're not utilizing something that comes from within, then they're not going to be able to develop something that may be able to peel more layers of the onion of what exactly we are, if everything's kind of like done for them.
Well, it's a complicated answer. I think my criticism of transhumanism is that, well, apart from it, the usual being a form of like weird secular Manichaeanism, but I think when it comes to crafting a world within a world, you're always ever going to get those attributes that you've already selectively programmed within. For example, if a transhumanist AI were able to create a separate universe, and there are physicists who talk about this. I don't know exactly the science, but they talk about how creating a universe the size of the palm of your hand could potentially be like the scope of our universe within however infinitesimal sort of measurement you could use. But the problem is that you're never, in my opinion at least, and people way smarter than us have talked about this, I guess, Roger Penrose or whoever. The problem is that you're never going to truly get past the capability of humans, mentioning Heidegger, to sort of clear their world and to arrive at a new present in terms of their capability of recognition, mental distension, and also the impulse towards creativity on artistic and philosophic level as such. And the reason for that is you can have an AI that can become so sophisticated in terms of guesswork about the nature of given factors within a matrix of probabilities and so forth. But the way that a lot of, again, transhumanists, the way that they think about it is entirely on materialistic terms, in terms of, how can we capture what they call quali? How can they truly fit the human experience within something that is a total outsidedness to the human? And I think that in some ways it's true that we already exist in a state of outsidedness to begin with. You talk about objective truth and reality and how there's a base to a sort of perspectivalism of truth, or what we know as reality as such. But in the same way, when you really truly sit down and analyze it, there is already always going to be a sort of perspectival nature to reality as such, because there's, it's like people, they talk about postmodernism and all of that stuff. In a way, we've already existed within a multiplicity upon multiplicities. It's just that now that we have more sophisticated views of what a multiplicity is, it doesn't change the fact that, yes, it's true that we live in a multitude, but whether we can experience the totality of that multitude, I think in some ways is almost impossible. And I don't really see a second order entity such as an AI. By that, I mean something that is generative from the human, like our ability to think and reason and to create. I think that the best we're going to get is something that is very second order. And for that to sort of maybe quantifiably reach a sort of perspectivalism to the point where it can predict different attributes and it can view different things at the same time the way a supercomputer can. But when it comes to that original spark of like what makes us us, our ability to venture into new sort of views of things and to discover things, I don't really see a jumping off point of a total outsidedness to that, like where the AI is going to sort of create something better than us and it's going to keep us around and sort of like tell us about it. Sort of like, you know, the Nick Land fantasy stuff. There's just the hard problem of how you get there that I think, I mean, again, I think this is a lot of tech determinism. Anyways, I'm just rambling, Lev. I don't know.
Well,
Well,
I
Ryan, I'm curious what you got to say to that, Ryan.
Yeah, I think we missed something in the very, very beginning of this whole conversation, which I think is a good definition of transhumanism. And to me, I'll just put my simple definition out there. It is the idea that we can and should use science and technology to overcome human biological limitations. And long ago, there was a message that blipped by in chat there. Someone asked the question, is a pirate with a peg leg an example of transhumanism? And
some posthumanists think so, but that's, yeah.
My answer to that would be, I think so, yes. And to explain that a little bit, if you ask someone from the year 1000 about what a transhumanist might be, if you explain to them the concept and then ask them to envision a transhumanist in the future, they might say that a transhumanist can fly, or they can transmit information across vast differences, or could repair their body parts if they fall off or they lose them, and take care of sickness. And by that definition of what a transhumanist would be 1,000 years ago, congratulations, we're all transhumanists. And I think that we are transhumanists. If you ask us today what a transhumanist might look like in 1,000 years, we might think of things like mind uploading, or people living in spacefaring civilizations, or augmenting our genetics to be what we want.
But I think, like you're mixing the two things up here. Space exploration, that's all great and beautiful. I have no problem with that whatsoever. But if we're talking about then things related to our brain, things related to genetics, you're crossing the barrier of outside and inside, at which point my worry again has to do with what exactly are we sacrificing as far as the human potential to affect the reality is.
Well, I think we can go back to the definition of the word cyborg there, which was, coined to describe humans traveling in space and how we would have to change our ability to survive in the environment of space. That's the whole concept of a cyborg to begin with. So I think many times when we're talking about spacefaring humans, we are inherently, unless we're talking about major geotransformations and terraforming of places like Mars and other ecosystems, we are inherently, I think, talking about modifying humans to survive in some of these environments, whether it's for long-term space travel or to exist in different atmospheres. That I think that's part of the process there. And I think those future humans in the year 3000, looking back at today, would consider themselves just as human as we do looking back at the year 1000, even though each successive 1,000-year leap would consider the one in the future to be transhumanist from their perspective. I wonder, if we are transhumanists from the perspective of someone 1,000 years ago, and we still feel the same human level that we are today, are we putting too much concern at the thought of losing whatever we consider our humanity?
I don't know, but at the same time, I think a lot of post-humanists would disagree. They would say that people in 1,000 years, I mean, granted, if tech determinism is a thing, they would say that the human would be so fundamentally altered that the peoples or the humanoids of the future would be a total outside entity that wouldn't even be recognizable as us. I think that's the greatest fear that people have, is the violation of the human as such, to let us to sort of consent to a space where the human becomes annihilated as we know it, because you could say that, the pirate with the peg leg back in the day, he still has a property of being human qua human. But when you talk about things that are fundamentally altering our being, I think that's the greatest fear. And that is something that, again, people would say that that's inevitable and that we
But
can sort
Gio,
of drive
give a
progress.
concrete example though.
A concrete example?
Yeah, because I feel like you're talking about a lot more about uploading the human consciousness into tech, or I mean,
No, but even biotech, that could be. Yeah.
Well, you go. I mean, I brought this up in the debate. I mean, it was it's like Biface using Homo erectus looking at us, having a conversation over the internet, with our faces on screens and stuff like that. I mean, that's just incomprehensible to the Homo erectus or whatever
But
hominid.
I just can't get past the sentiment. And who was the one that wrote the Cyborg Manifesto? Was it Donna Haraway that said, if nature is unjust, then just change nature? I mean, it's kind of like there's so much assumptions to that, even just that one singular statement. And I know that's not like transhumanism proper. That's more of like cyborg feminism going into xenofeminism. But I think like the same sentiment is there, and that really it really irks people for a number of very good reasons, because it would mean the end of the ways in which humans relate to humans in terms of our capacity to live in a world where, suffering is a guarantee. And whether that suffering is a productive, I think, again, we're just treading like old waters here, but I think that transhumanism wants to obviate things that really do make us human and really give us experiences that cannot be easily done away with. And maybe, perhaps either through some like weird sort of chthonic force of nature, then just on the cusp of getting to the singularity, whatever it is. I don't know. I think I don't see it happening maybe within the next 500-600 lifetimes. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just being pessimistic, but
yeah, but I'm still confused as to like what you're characterizing transhumanism as, because I feel like what Ryan laid out is like really concrete and like conceivable, and he almost makes it an attractive proposition. Like, and I can't immediately grasp what anything in what Ryan described as like a disappearance of the human. Now, I actually end up on your side of it, and I can see Heidegger in what you're saying completely. I do think this type of thing threatens to negate what is fundamentally human in us, but I don't see how the way Ryan's characterizing it would do such a thing.
Oh, maybe not the way Ryan's characterizing it, but I think like if
right.
so,
then if it's not the way Ryan's characterizing it, how would you characterize it specifically?
That's tricky. I mean, like the again, because it depends which transhumanism you're talking about. You're always going to get like a different answer. I mean, if you're going by like the standard like Kurzweilian like transhumanism that is strictly like predicated upon greater leaps of technology, I mean, even just like having a conscious experience outside of like the quote unquote human machine, I mean, that in itself would alter so many different predicates of what it means to even experience life as a human, that, I mean, to just extend our consciousness beyond like our quote unquote meat sacks. I mean, that.
Yeah, but our consciousness already are extended like vastly.
Oh yeah, I believe so, like on a spiritual level, but like, I mean, when it comes to like
no, I mean physically. Right now, the internet is doing exactly that.
Yes and no. I mean, it's still fun. We're still fundamentally locked within our heads. We just have a greater physical capability of communicating with people. But I mean, there's people that believe technology pretty much stagnated within the last 20 or so years. But that's still just, I would say the internet is getting there. And the internet has a lot of different feedback loops that we're not like consciously aware of. But at the same time, I don't think it's a true like res extensa in terms of like thinking of transhumanism inside the human. Now, if you're talking about like even something like Neuralink, it's still fundamentally a physical thing that is still like engaging with their consciousness as it is right now, the way that, you know, a webcam and the internet does. But when it comes to, like, you know, these other things, that's when you start to get really crazy. That's, you know, at least in my opinion. But sorry, I'm not thinking very clearly, but that's, yeah.
That was well said.
Absolutely. So, guys, I think we are heading to the end of the stream right now. I just want to say that this is a very fascinating conversation having to do with the nature of consciousness, the nature of reality. These are things that we're going to be prodding and poking at as we continue discovering more about what it means to be human. What I want to leave with are book recommendations. This is not something that we usually do at the end of the stream, but I think with this cross opportunity here, having people who are, you know, both metaphysically minded, intellectually, philosophically minded, scientifically minded, I think this would be a good opportunity for exchanging books that you would recommend that people read that they otherwise would not. So let's start with Ryan. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but if there are any books that you would recommend people to read that you know, they may not have that it may not have occurred to them to read, please let us know what you would personally recommend. Maybe you wrote a book that you want people to read. This could be a good chilling opportunity.
I have not written a book, but I'm not going to name anything here that is like obscure. I'm sure this is something that many people listening to this have already read, but I want to provide a pitch for it anyway. And that is, I already mentioned Yuval Noah Harari earlier, and I think his two sequential books, A Brief History of Mankind and Homo Deus, give a good overview of kind of where I'm coming from on this, which is like the history of humanity leading up to what at least he sees as what I would consider our transhumanist future. And I don't think Yuval Noah Harari is a transhumanist, but I think that he, in studying humanity and looking at where we're going, has come to the conclusion that many transhumanists have. And I think if anyone wants a good, you know, non-biased as much as possible look at where we might be headed, that's a good look for something to think about.
Excellent. And before we move on, any thoughts on Yuval Noah Harari, Geo, Weird Hiker, Astral, Remus? Any thoughts on the guy?
I'll check him out.
Yeah,
I love reading about this
I've
stuff.
not read his books. I've seen them, but
He's
I've never
the Reddit
actually.
philosopher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, no, hold on. I kind of want to capture that a bit. Why would you say that he is a Reddit? Like, what to you resonates with him being Reddit?
Oh, it's been a long time since I've read him, but I mean, it's the fact that he's popular on there. It's kind of sus. I don't know. I mean, I guess. I mean.
Wait, Ryan. Are you
mainstreaming a lot of
aware?
that different-
Are you aware of this whole like antipathy towards Redditors that may exist on some circles of the internet? Have you ever run across this before? I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I'm not a Redditor, so this is definitely not where I am familiar with this work from.
Oh, man.
But I think what might be being verbalized there is just kind of it's popular, so it can't be that good sentiment. I don't know.
I wouldn't say it's necessarily that it's popular. Like, Geo, would you be able to look a little bit more in detail? Like, it's not just the fact that whatever Redditors like is just whatever is popular. It's more of a je ne sais quoi. Like, how would you describe it?
Well, I think you could say that it follows along the same tread of a lot of different, like, how would you call them? Like pop human development books like Guns, Germs, and Steel, and that it makes a lot of assumptions about things from like a, you know, purely sort of, it has a lot of predicates that are very like presumptuous about different things and about the utility of different things that serviced humanity. And I think like in general, like when people say something's like Reddit, I mean, it means different things, but usually they mean of like the sort of like you know, like consumerist, like liberal utilitarian variety of like, you know, this thing was advantageous to us, therefore it's going to work, therefore in the future it's going to be advantageous, so therefore you know, ergo sum. And so it's like, I think that's what people mean by saying that it's like the Reddit, like, you know, pop history book or whatnot. It's something that not just means like for the masses, but a very particular type of like I don't know. Help me out here, Remus. You probably can give you can verbalize it a bit better.
Well, Redditors are just fucking annoying. Like that's their thing. Is they're annoying people who are kind of.
There's something deeper than that, but I guess.
No, yeah, it is. But that I'm keeping it simple. But it's like there's a need to please. There's a need to conform. There's a need to not stray from sort of the pack mentality. And being contrarian doesn't mean that you're not still in a pack. Like, you know what I mean? There's like a very shallow level of
But also I think like just the novelty of like viewing things purely from a like technocentric lens itself has become like the I effing love science ideology.
Yeah, exactly. It's like look at this, look at all this progress. It just never ends.
Yeah.
Progress forever.
I can watch porn in Neuralink now. That's sort of like
exactly. I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to goon in my Tesla. You know what I'm saying? Like
No,
that's
so I think
VR.
I think what you guys are getting at is something that we discussed a little bit before Gio came in here with yourself, Ryan, which is their concern is that we have this limitation that's being put on the experiences of people where they get all Reddit excited about these certain possibilities, but it's still within the framework that they kind of know. Same thing like with all the superhero movies and things like that. You know, it's like they have the familiar and there's not as much mystery. There's not as much of like going into the unknown as far as, you know, what I want to always push back on as far as where we consider to be the limit of our understanding, if that makes any sense. Like, I just want to make sure I'm being clear about this. Like,
yeah, that makes sense. They're orthodox. Like, I don't know how.
Yeah.
You know what? Big Lenny said it best. They're cookie cutter.
Well, yeah, they appeal. It's all about an appeal to consensus, and the most frustrating thing about it is that they think that they're not doing that. I think that's what drives me insane.
But to push back on everything that I just said right now, and to actually give a lot of praise to the books that Ryan recommended.
I don't mean to shit all over Ryan's stuff either.
No, if you don't have a bedrock idea of how 1 + 1 is 2, of how a lot of these things are formed, then you're just having your head in the fucking clouds all the time, which is not good. You have to have if you don't have the bedrock, you cannot go above the bedrock. You can only assume certain things, and you could be all groovy and spiritual and whatever, but it's not really going to make as much progress unless your feet are on the ground. Say that again?
Cannot build without a foundation.
Exactly, and I think that all these things that, Ryan, you're talking about, it is absolutely important for all of us, especially myself, to imbue within. So I really appreciate you bringing those two books up. And just any thoughts before we would turn to the other panelists for their books recommendations about what we just said right now?
I don't go on Reddit really, so I can't engage in that conversation there. I don't know what's happening there, so I can't.
Don't worry,
to
man.
that.
We're not accusing you of being a Redditor. Don't worry.
Oh God, no.
Yeah. No, this is less. This is not for you. This is more for people that you probably do encounter in your workplace and various communities. Like, if you do notice that they would put a certain shield around what they consider to be possible. All that I could possibly advocate for somebody like you. I wouldn't advocate this for Gio or for, other people who I would say, like, yes, learn as much as you can about the things that Ryan O'Shea knows, because he knows way more than a lot of you guys do about these things. But for you, Ryan, who knows a lot about these things, my advice would be to see if we can go beyond those things as well and get more into the mystery of what exactly may lie beyond a lot of the things that people consider to be solid. So again, this is just my
That's
own.
A lot of gobbledygook there, Lev.
Well, it is what it is. But the point is that, Ryan, I believe that there is a lot of wonderful things to discover in this world, and I love the fact that you were here on the stream discovering it with us, and will continue to discover in wherever you happen to go. Anyway, let us go to Weird Hiker, book recommendation. Go, and everybody subscribe now. Subscribe.
Thank you, everyone, for indulging me in my twisted fantasy. And I don't really have a book recommendation. I do have a quote that I want to read. I think it might be new for Ryan. It's going to be very familiar for everyone else, but it is just such a good singular answer to pretty much all of the questions that were raised today.
Oh.
And I'm just going to start and read it. Here we go. Animals walk around in a state of permanent religious intoxication. This is the natural condition of the mind and intellect, the moment-to-moment perception of man as well. I heard some computer fool say that religion is the, quote, older virtual reality, unquote, experience to justify his scam industry. No, the denuded state of the spirit and intellect where you walk around demystified and disenchanted is the virtual reality condition, and a terrible condition at that.
Nice.
Yo, I told you he was my boy. That's it right there.
Thank you.
That's
All right,
it right there.
Astral Flight, your book recommendation.
How can I follow that recommendation up? But you know what, man? I could give a lot, but I'm gonna just say Heidegger's question concerning technology, because it actually does. It's just an essay, actually. It's in his book, Basic Writings. And it's like only like 10 pages long, but 10 pages for Heidegger is like 3 hours to read. And the reason why I would say that is because I think he gets like at the foundational metaphysical complaint I have about the transhumanist movement, and I don't think that you even need to really get into the nitty-gritty of the technology, even though I really don't buy it, like that it's going to do what it says it's going to do. But Heidegger is definitely like a reactionary, and he's definitely anti-technology, and that essay, it's pretty hard to get at the root of what he's trying to say. But I think the easiest way I could sum that essay up is to say that technology negates the essence of the human, and existentialism in general, and Heidegger in particular, argue that kind of like what you have to do is you have to like build towards your essence. You don't just exist in the essence of like your pure humanness, or as Weird Hiker's mysterious author that he read might say, you don't simply walk around in a state of religious intoxication all the time. It's a state that you can like fleetingly grasp, that you have to work towards once you grow up into a mature adult. Children, I think, do walk around in that. And anyway, I believe Heidegger's arguing that technology makes it more difficult for you to access that essence of what he would call Dasein. And it's almost like in a transhumanist world, we're just completely cut off from that essence. And I think that's probably what you're trying to say to an extent, Gio, before.
Or remember, Dasein means like being there or being towards death later on. I mean, depending on which book of Heidegger you're reading. But let's say
but
in
the question in Basic Writings, in the question concerning technology and a letter on humanism, he like makes up a new word, and he says it's like ecstatic or ecstasy, and it's like you're like you reach that moment of like achieving your essence and like the unity of your being. And I believe what he's saying with the question concerning technology is that technology like strips away your faculties that you use to achieve your essence. So I worry that that Lev's characterization of the rascal scooter is like all too apt. It's all too on point, and like, you know, like
Wait,
somebody.
The Little Rascals came up. No. I love that movie when I was a kid.
I don't mean to laugh, but it's just like the name Rascal.
Did you ever watch the second one? I never watched the second one. I heard it was
no,
great,
Gio. We're not talking about the Little Rascals. We're talking about the Rascal Scooter.
Now.
The one that But imagine like Little Rascals, that's even worse. That's like, imagine if kids like they grow up and they're already like obese and they have to like ride the Little Rascals.
Oh, you mean the Ricky scooter? Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Okay, but just like I gave you guys a chance to respond to that book, Ryan, would you like to respond to that book recommendation of Heidegger? I don't know if you have any thoughts on Heidegger himself or anything related to that, but I would love for any thoughts you may have on it.
No, I mean, I agree with the recommendation. I think it's definitely worth checking into, and I can definitely see the criticisms that were brought up using Heidegger to address some of the things that I said. I totally appreciate all of that. But going back to the Rascal thing, I just want to make it clear that I do, in fact, consider Rascal Scooters to be an example of transhumanism. So I'll just end.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, it definitely
America's
is.
going to be full of transhumanists.
It definitely is, but I feel
I get to say, because I'm fat, I get to say it.
I agree with Ryan. We already are transhumanists.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I also like use technology to enable hiking, and I don't see any problem with that. Like, I think navigational technology is great, and people should use it and experience the world with their bodies, and like not be intimidated by needing to learn how to like. You should learn to read maps because that's your backup, and you should know how to do it. But like, you get that freedom opened up to you if by just having the app called Gut Hooks or whatever, something that tells you how to navigate a trail. Obviously have your backup, but that helps so much. And like, I do think that there's a place, like, as a you should be a mountaineering hiking cyborg. You just need to be engaging with the world and learning about it through your body, because that's the only actual source of knowledge, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And last but not least, we have Remus. Well, I also have a book recommendation, but first, Remus, go for it, my friend. What book would you recommend to all the good people watching this?
Read Berserk. That's my whole answer.
Well,
Rest
that
in
brings
peace.
us. Well, that brings us rest in
R.I.P..
peace. That brings us to what's happening tomorrow. So, for those who do not know, tomorrow we are going to have a stream about Berserk. Rest in peace, Murasan. You brought us a wonderful work this entire time. I know that it is not finished, but there is so much to talk about as far as the world of Berserk, and I've read it, I think, pretty much up until the last issue. So I know, Ryan, are you a fan of Berserk? Have you ever seen the anime, read the manga, anything?
Not familiar.
Good, because now is your time to start. It's and you already, like, it'll end at a certain point, but already there is just like so much that is there that I think is just a beautiful. It's a real work of art. So we are going to be talking about this tomorrow, 2 p.m. But this is patrons only. So for all of you guys who are watching us, is like, you know what? I would love to watch BTR tomorrow. Well, guess what? You can't, because you're not a patron, but you can be. You can become a patron. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/breaktherules with 3 in the THE, and you will become a patron. And $5 patrons, that is the limit. $5 gets you entrance to these exclusive streams that we're going to be doing a lot more of. Secret Discord areas. $20 is going to get you a beautiful wooden magnet like this one over here, the definitely legit magnet, glowing eyes edition, because you could put a flashlight or whatever you want inside of it so that the eyes will glow, but definitely legit. It's the dog. You guys have to have the dog, just like the dog's behind me. So anyway, guys, definitely legit magnet, as well as other wooden magnets coming right up yearly, on a yearly basis, if you remain a patron, that is. And then $30 patrons are going to get a beautiful sketch from Giovanni Panicietti. Here is print. Here is the beautiful Patreon print in action from the TFW No GF series. You know you want it. You know you need it. So become a patron today, and you're going to get that for a $30 patronage. $50 patronage gets you all of the above, plus the beautiful Warhammer 40k, I said it correctly this time, figures from Jules Hamilton, painted by him. You are also going to get another beautiful painting, this time from Geo, and you are also going to get a custom wooden magnet, whatever you want. We are going to create that. My father, Alexander Polyakov, brilliant artist, is going to create that for you, wonderful people. But again, you're not going to be able to see the stream tomorrow unless you become a patron, and you will also join in on the stream if you want. I have the Zoom link scheduled at the ready for all of our patrons who want to talk about Berserk tomorrow, and we're going to be having a lot more of these, just so you know. And not only that, but guys, here's what is coming up next. No, okay, I'm going to say what's coming up next week right for the end. Let's see, we had Remus. Oh, this is the end, isn't it? Okay, then I'm going to say it right now. We are going to have the Lev Polyakov Lev stream, art stream, coming up on Sunday. And this one is going to be with Bimbo Ubermensch and Sonia, supposedly. Gio, are you excited about that one?
Oh yeah, they're both fads. So from what I've been told by people on Twitter, so it's good. And before that, actually, Lev, we have another thing.
Yes, that's right. We are going to be, before that, at 11 o'clock, we are going to be live with the Prudentialist. Let me put up his YouTube channel as well, and I am very excited about that. The Prudentialist, wonderful guest. We have had him on the last stream about governance, and I'm sure he has a thing or two to say about that experience. And while I'm searching for the link, Gio, can you just tell us real quick, what did you think about that experience in short?
I felt horrified, Lev. Horrified. It was peering into the eyes of the, to quote Alex Jones, the wicked globalists that run this world. So it was quite. No, I mean, it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was very interesting. Put it that way. I mean, yeah. I'll say no more. I'll save it for the Prudentialist stream.
It was quite something, quite interesting. So the Prudentialist, this is his YouTube channel. We are going to be live on the Prudentialist, 11 a.m. Subscribe to the Prudentialist, be there or be square. And then we are also going to have a stream on progress. I already mentioned this in the beginning. I'm going to mention this right now. Defining progress. Are we progressing, and towards what ends? This is going to be on next Tuesday. You see the picture of this squirrel over here. Look how cute this is. My father painted this. So it has like the rodent eats over here, like the Uber Eats, climbing up to the squirrel's house, and it has like a little go away sign here with the heart. I think that's adorable. So who we're going to have for that one, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have the following people for that one. We are going to have Samuel Hammond, aka Ham and Cheese on Twitter, who is the director of Poverty and Welfare Policy, a pluralist, and he is part of the Nick Sonnen Center. Gio, are you familiar with the Nick Sonnen Center?
Nick Sonnen Center? Like
Nick Sonnen Center.
Like Richard Nixon? Or no?
No, it is a Washington D.C. based think tank that advocates environmentalism, immigration reform, civil liberties, and strengthening social insurance around market-oriented principles. It is named after William A. Nixon, an economic advisor to President Ronald Reagan. Good old Ronnie Reagan. So there we go. That is what is crack-a-lacking on Tuesday. Well, that is one of the people. We are also going to have joined with him Nigel Carlsbad. Hotep Sophia. Conscious Karakal. Catherine Brodsky. And Leonela Shmakalova, a.k.a. Wired Isotope. She is really into the VR stuff. She's amazing. And then we are going to have Thursday, May 27th, Brittany Venti. Brittany Venti.
Oh my God.
Brittany Venti.
Oh my God.
It is happening. Brittany
terrible.
Venti is joining us. We're going to have a lot of fun together. I am very excited. And we are also going to have Jessix. We are also going to have Verse Laloon. And And we are going to have MK Ultra Money. So there we go.
God, even worse. I hope Brittany knows what she's getting into. I hope her manager informed her.
It's going to be great. I am excited. I am excited. Look, everybody's going to be nice. We're always nice. We're always good. We are good in the hood. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for watching this amazing stream. Ryan O'Shea, is there anything you would like to plug before we end this? I am, of course, going to plug your Twitter, your podcast. Is there anything else you would like to share with all the good people watching this?
No plugs, but I had a great time on this. I enjoyed the conversations, a lot of interesting feedback from everyone. I'd be happy to continue the conversation with all the panelists here and also everyone in the chat. Feel free to reach out to me and we can continue the conversation.
I love it. I am loving it. Futuregrind.org. That is where you could find Ryan's podcast. Weird Hiker on Twitter. Is there anything else you would like to plug before we end, my friend?
Oh no. If you want to follow me, sometimes I tweet about things that I like, opinions and things. If you like my opinions that I've shared, I guess you could follow me at 87 numerical LB of B's. I'm very friendly. Also, if you want advice on hiking stuff, please ask me because I really want more people to do that, regardless of experience level. I think that's like really important, and that's why I'm on Twitter. So yeah, that's it.
Couldn't agree more. Just don't get kidnapped like people do in certain regions. I mean, we had a whole episode about that, and I just want to make sure I'm not gonna go hiking alone, probably because of that. I don't know. Would you say anything contrary to that? Like, would you risk the getting kidnapped by the Agarthans?
I think that would be a blessing. So I personally, I'm looking for that. I'm going to Mount Shasta this summer, which is the epicenter of that. I'm finally climbing that one. So
All right, this may be
let's
the
hope I
last
meet
time
'em.
we've heard. This may be the last time we have heard from Weird Hiker, unless we figure out a way to get internet into the Hollow Earth.
Could
So
be it.
next could be it. Could be the last time. So treasure this time that you have with your hiking friends, ladies and gentlemen. It may all be over before you know it. Astral flight. You have flown away from Twitter, or rather, you have flown the coop because they were like hitting you with a newspaper. So where can people find you right now? What's
Astro,
going
is
on,
it
buddy?
true that you got banned because of certain someone I reverse debated, or rather her simps? Is that true?
Gio's gonna force me into it.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
listen. This is what I'm gonna say. In the Earthsea series, if you learn the true name of something, you hold power over it. And there are people out there who like to call themselves sex workers, and they like to say that they're engaging in some ancient, sacred profession. But they're keen to the works of the wizards who speak their true names. And if you speak their true name on Twitter, there is a more powerful demon that they have under their employ who fucking. Oh, I can't curse. Oh my God. Can you edit
No,
that
we
out?
curse all the time.
Say
Oh,
fucking,
okay.
yeah.
As long as you're not saying certain gamer words, that's
Yeah,
fine.
you can't say the gamer
There
words.
is a more powerful demon who comes in when you speak the true name of the oldest profession, and it deep sixes your account and puts you in purgatory. But I'm sliding ever
Interesting.
closer to hell. So sadly, I do have a new little account, but it's very underground at the moment. So I
You
don't
just
have
have
anything.
to follow. You just have to follow a lot of the people you wouldn't usually follow. That's how the Twitter algorithm wouldn't know it's you.
Yeah, that's what everyone's telling me. Officially, though, I'm not back on Twitter. Anyway,
Would you
listen.
like me to post it or not? Not yet. It's still fresh.
No, don't.
No,
Yeah, don't
do
post it yet. Don't
do
post
it.
it yet.
Okay.
Don't do
I was just I was just trying to be funny. The real
Okay.
truth is I used a bad word on Twitter. I got my account banned, and I'm so grateful that you let me come on here. This was a lot of fun. Ryan, I really like the way you talk about transhumanism. I'd love to talk to you about it again. Lev,
Well, we'll have it again. Well,
you have an awesome forum here. I
it
think
seems every
what you
month
do
we
is
have a
great.
transhumanist thing.
Yeah, I would love to come back for anything. And
Well,
maybe I'll
this
be
is gonna
back
be
up and running by that
I would
time.
love that. Well, this is the next of our reverse debates. Our next one may be, and I'm not sure when, if this is going to be the one that's going to be every other Thursday. All these debates, by the way, the reverse ones, they are every other Thursday. So not next Thursday, but next Thursday. We are definitely going to have one that's going to be about the Federal Reserve, and we will have a professor of macroeconomics at George Mason University who is going to be advocating against the Fed, and we're going to have to find somebody who will advocate for the Fed until the masks come off. So that's going to be a very fascinating discussion. Look forward to that happening in the future. And Remus, what can I plug of yours, my friend?
You can always plug my Twitter. Come follow me, and I will extol the virtues of the destruction of alien races, and also the Butlerian Jihad. That's also a thing that I will definitely talk about. Also, there's going to be a lot of Kentaro Miura mourning in the next little while. I'm a massive fan. Berserk was a very important story in my life, and So the next little while is going to be me being very upset about that, not going to lie. But that's okay,
R.I.P.
because that's what it's about. It's
And,
about the struggle,
and
boys.
And Gio, are you going to join us tomorrow for the Berserk stream? I mean, I don't want to spoil Berserk for you, but it's like, shit, I would love for you to...
I might. We have to come up with new ways of like having exclusive Patreon content. Maybe we'll have streams where we do say the gamer words one more.
BTR After Dark.
BTR After Dark. Yeah, there
I don't know if Patreon would approve of that.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but okay. Next thing that I just want to say real quick is that I forgot to say my book recommendation. It has nothing to do with whatever you wonderful people were talking about. It is a book that I recently read called The Secret History by Donna Tartt. It's just a really fascinating book, kind of talking about a lot of these mystery school traditions. But that's, I mean, you guys have to read it. You guys have to check it out to really understand what I'm getting at here. But trust me when I say that this is such a fascinating book. It was written in the early 90s. Have any of you guys even heard of it or no?
Yeah. I haven't read it, unfortunately, but I do know a lot about Donna Tartt, and it's supposed to be a really, really good book.
Definitely. I'm going to read her next book. I don't remember what it's called. Something Friend, Little Friend. I don't remember. I think it's called Little Friend. So, and Fallen Student says the CGI Berserk sucked. I couldn't agree more. It did not capture the same essence as the anime.
Yeah, can I just make the definitive opinion here? The correct opinion about Berserk. So if you're going to watch or consume Berserk in any way, the correct way to do it is to just read the manga. Any other way is stupid and wrong. You can, but it's wrong. If you want to go to the next best thing, you can go and do the 1997 anime. Next best thing after that, there's 3 movies on Netflix. You can watch those. That's the
Netflix adaptation.
It's on Netflix. They licensed it. They didn't make it. Yeah. And it's not live action. It's not bad. It's just not perfect. And then that hideous abomination from 2017, pretend that it doesn't exist, banish it from your mind, excommunicate it from society. It's the worst thing I've ever seen. Nothing could be more disrespectful to Berserk, but that's what it is. So yeah, just read the manga.
Excellent. Now, guys, before we go, I cannot stress this enough right now. Listen up and listen good. I want you to look at I want you to look in my eyes right now. Just here. I'm just gonna go right into the eyes.
Oh,
right
God.
in those T40s.
Yeah, here it comes. All right, listen. Listen. We have to work together right now to grow this thing. Subscribe. I cannot stress this enough. Subscribe right now. Look into my eyes. I'm talking to you right now. All the people who are watching this right now, just like the band of the Hawk was small, we can grow and we can take over this fucking kingdom. I swear to God, subscribe right now. Help us grow. You are not going to be sorry. Look what we did. We brought in people from, we brought people associated with the Federal Reserve, with Davos. We're bringing people with all of these think tanks. Who does this but us?
E-girls.
Yeah, and then we tell them about gooners.
Yes, yes, exactly. Oh, Gio, you missed what happened. I told Ryan about Goon.
Oh God,
30
that's the price you pay for coming on BTR.
Is to know the eldritch horror of the goon.
Yes. It's like when you ask who is Chris Chan. It's like, do you have a few hours?
Okay, so basically, guys, what I'm getting to here is that we are going to grow thanks to your
By the
help.
way, Chris Chan's a transhumanist, by the way. I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah. But my favorite thing about Chris Chan is that he came out as a gamer. And guys, my fellow gamers, listen, subscribe right now. I don't know how else to stress it. You gotta subscribe to our YouTube, subscribe to our D-Live. We are everywhere, by the way, guys. Go into our D-Live and our Twitch. We are also doing this on Twitch, believe it or not. So subscribe to YouTube, subscribe to Twitch. Hell, subscribe to Facebook. I don't care if you dox yourself. I'm not gonna know who. All I'm gonna see is that new people liked our Facebook page and they watch us on YouTube, and I'm not gonna pry into your lives like I do with certain Greek women who I'm not gonna mention, but you know what?
God! Oh!
Okay, we are ending.
Do
not become
Look
a
at Ryan's
photographer.
face.
Do not research. Do not become a photographer.
Do not research.
Do not research.
Christine Patellos.
Oh, Gio, please, please. Don't make this any worse than it already is. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching the stream. I appreciate the ever-loving heaven out of all of you. Subscribe, add a like, write comments. The more that you comment on the stream, the stronger it gets. You guys can help us grow as you've been doing, and we are almost at 4,000 subscribers. We have so little to go. We have like 70, it's in 73 right now, I think. We have barely nothing until we reach 4K. With your help, we're going to reach 4K. This is the end of the stream. Subscribe. Oh, wait, Gio. I did not plug in your YouTube channel. What do you want to promote before we go? You've got the last word, buddy. What do you want to promote?
If I have time to edit, which I probably won't, hopefully by the weekend or by Monday, I'll have the new episode of Style Talks, which I do with Matthew Stout, where we talk about contemporary art. And we have our infamous episode that we recorded about the new statue in the Rockefeller Center. And we go into all the artwork in the Rockefeller Center itself. So
nice. All right, guys, this is it. This is the end of the stream. I love you.